Welcome to the Irish Breakdown. Of course, it is Mailbag Friday. I am Sean Davis from the Lucky Lefty Podcast and Irish Breakdown, and that dude is the big boss man. B. Drisk is what I call him, Brian Driscoll. Of course, I'm going to get to your comments, your questions. It's Mailbag Friday. That's what we're here for, the free fall. But some huge news for Notre Dame. You talked about what they were
Literally.
missing. Yes, literally some huge news as Notre Dame receives its first commitment of the month of June, and hopefully it will be the beginning of a lot more. And B. Driss, you can get us started talking about the young man out of Clearwater, the big man out of Clearwater that is now part of the 2024 class.
That would be Sean Sevillano, who is from Clearwater Academy International. It is a school for international students because Sean Sevillano is Canadian. He is not an American. And so he becomes the third Canadian defensive line, former, native Canadian to commit to Notre Dame on the defensive line in the last 2 years, which he was asked about during his commitment story today. John, it's very interesting how we kind of got here, and I think that we've talked a lot about the process of what got us here. We don't need to rehash that anymore. We're going to focus on this young man, and because Sean and I feel the same way about the process, but we're here. And Sean Sevillano has committed to Notre Dame. He's the fourth defensive lineman to commit to Notre Dame in this class. A little bit of an interesting backstory. He actually committed to Notre Dame a couple days before the news broke about Owen Wafel. And that kind of factored into some of the timing of the Owen Wafel decision.
And it's funny because we knew that, right, even though we couldn't say it, and that might be why we were had a little angst with the situation.
Right. So you got him, and look, the big reason for this push is obviously, so Notre Dame got on him in March. They offered him in March, and that kind of began a process for this young man of really kind of blowing up a little bit as a recruit. He's someone who, when you watch the sophomore film, Sean, it's really not overly impressive, to be honest with you. It's not really great film. It's not going to really blow you away. And his offer list reflected not great sophomore film. Well, then you look at his junior film and you're like, this is a little bit of a different deal. This kid has some ability. He was very productive. He went from 5 tackles for loss and I think 1.5 sacks as a sophomore to 40 tackles for loss and 19 sacks as a junior. Kind of similar to the jump that, if you remember, that Gabriel Rubio made during his junior season, although Gabriel was more productive as a sophomore, but similar situation where you saw a big jump as a sophomore. And then all of a sudden you kind of get out this spring and he becomes a much bigger recruit. People start to take more notice of him. He starts to be a guy that starts getting some interest. Programs like Ohio State get on him. Obviously, Notre Dame got on him, and Auburn got on him recently. Miami got on him recently. But his recruiting profile was really picking up, and he's a guy that I don't think it's reflected in the rankings yet. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the services jump him up in the rankings, at least based on the way they talk to him. They may not now that he's committed. But Notre Dame actually got on him kind of early, Sean, relative to everybody else. When you go back and look at when they offered him in the middle of March. That was about 2 weeks after Ohio State. Up until then, he had offers from, Cincinnati's and Louisville's and Wake Forest and the Stanfords and Kansas's and Illinois. But the big-time schools didn't really get off on him yet. Ohio State offers March 3rd. Notre Dame offers about 11 days later. Miami, Auburn, Wisconsin all offer in May. And he got an offer from Notre Dame on March 14th, and he was on campus within 11 days. And he was here for the March 25th weekend with Logan Thomas and Justin Scott, also on campus that day. And so at the time, Notre Dame was really was playing catch up with Ohio State. Ohio State had kind of taken that early lead. They were the first big time program to jump on him. They got on him. He was a guy that they liked a lot, but there was a couple other nose tackles that they liked a little bit more, including Jaden Jackson from IMG. So they liked him. They were recruiting, but they weren't really pushing for a commitment. And what that allowed Notre Dame to do was to get in there and say, hey, we really like you. Got to know him, visited his school. He visited Notre Dame. And I think Notre Dame kind of decided pretty quickly, like, this is more of the body type and the type of player that we're looking for and that we need at the nose. That kind of big, thick, really powerful type of player that brings a lot of the dirty work that we haven't seen a ton of from Notre Dame the last couple of years. And then when he became more of a playmaker, again, playmaker at that level, we'll break down the film and show why there's a lot of work needed if that's going to translate. But standing next to him at that event, Sean, I think you were there that day as well. So you
Yeah,
saw
I was.
He's 6'1.5", 6'2". He's not a real tall guy.
Yeah.
Very stout, enormous. You talked yesterday about Kedron Young's. I mean, he's got enormous legs.
Yeah.
Like, he's got your typical nose guard gut inside, but he's got humongous legs. And he's a kid that squats, I think it was like 600 pounds or something like that. Very weight room strong guy as well. And Notre Dame just felt like this is the kind of thick, stout, lower-bodied kind of guy that they just don't have enough of at nose tackle. I mean, right now, really, it's only Aiden Canaan is really the only guy that fits that profile. They have a couple of the guys that are 300-plus pounds now. Gabriel Rubio's 300 pounds, but he's a 6'5", just a different type of body. And so I think they just decided, as much as they liked Owen Wafel as a player, they decided that they wanted to get more of this body type and this style of play, where Owen Wafel's a penetrator, a playmaker, a guy that, can play nose, but maybe he's better suited at 3. They wanted a guy that's more of a pure nose, and this kid is a pure nose. Yeah. And so once they were able to kind of make that push and recruit him, and just continue to climb, because other schools were not necessarily pushing for a commitment, Notre Dame was willing to do so. And I think that's one of the many reasons, on top of him being a high academic kid and a lot of other things. I think the Canadian pipeline helped him feel comfortable with that type of decision. He's not a native Floridian, obviously, which helps with the decision to come up north. He's actually going to be a lot closer to home now than he would have been if he'd have gone to an SEC school. So that helps too. It's not your typical Florida recruitment. But Notre Dame was able to get it done. And now Washington played a big role in this. I mean, he's one who wanted this move to be made. He's one that did the heavy lifting for Sean Sevillano. He's the one that went and recruited this young man and got it done. He played a very big role. Obviously, Marcus Freeman's always involved with kids like this. But Al Washington was the driver of this recruitment, Sean.
The fact that you mentioned that 2 of the 3 big linemen that were on campus that March 25th day are now in the fold, it is imperative that you go ahead and complete the trio. And that would be that might end up being the best, visit of the spring, March 25th. And I think a real conversation took place with Justin Scott, just to throw that in there. But there is a lot that came out of there. You talked about Al Washington making the decision. Look, before we move on to class impact, Brian, I just really think that there's nothing wrong with the decision that was made by Coach Washington. We don't have a problem with identifying, this guy would be a better fit. There are just some other things in the operation of how things came out in the wash that didn't make us feel comfortable about the situation. But as far as whether or not they need to upgrade and get a guy like this in the class, oh, absolutely. That goes without saying.
So when you look at the class impact of it, Sean, I mean, I think that's one of those things right now. I think sometimes we get a little bit too focused on, well, Georgia has a 330-pounder, so Notre Dame needs that kind of guy. They don't need that kind of guy only. What I feel is the ideal situation is it's with everything. Give me some diversity here.
Yeah.
Give me a Howard Cross, Donovan Heinisch type mixing in a rotation with a Sean Sevillano, Davion Dixon. And it's very clear this isn't a one-off, because he follows Davion Dixon, who is a very similar type of player. I think Davion is far more advanced than Sean was, especially as a sophomore. I mean, Davion did as a sophomore statistically what Sean did as a junior statistically. Neither of them play against very good competition, so it has to be taken into consideration. But very similar players. They're clearly looking to add some more beef to the position.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think when you look at the class, you've got 3 defensive ends in the class right now as far as the class impact. You met your needs there. One of your ends could potentially slide inside and be a 3 technique if he continues to grow, referring to Bryce Young there. But you're talking about a guy that gives you not just a position nose tackle that you wanted, but he gives you a style of play that you don't have. And what I have seen a lot of with Notre Dame and nose tackle is a lot of the Howard Crosses and Jason Onyes and Donovan Heinisch type of players. Well, this gives you something different, something you don't have a lot of. You have one guy like that, Aiden Canaan. He's going to be a senior next year. It's probably his last year at Notre Dame. And I think somebody asked in the chat, did the success of Chris Smith have anything to do with wanting a kid like this? And I don't know that it did or didn't, but it should.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the fact that this is not the kind of guy you put in at nose and play him 50 snaps a game. This is a guy you kind of play 30 snaps a game, as part 25 snaps a game as part of a rotation. But when he's in there, he plays hard, he eats up space, and he's physical. And I think that's something that Notre Dame liked and needed and wanted, and now they have. And a guy that clearly some other programs that are doing very well on the recruiting trail going after. Miami recruited him, offered him recently. They were trying to get him on campus. Auburn went after him recently. They were trying to get on campus. He actually scheduled an official visit to Auburn the third week of June. He was supposed to visit Ohio State officially this weekend, but clearly that's not going to happen now. So he'll be coming to Notre Dame, I believe, next weekend. I believe is when he's coming to Notre Dame. But he'll be back on campus for one of these visits. So it definitely meets a need of something that Notre Dame was looking for, and gives them a different body type of that. And we're going to just pull up some film here real quickly, Sean, and just dive into the film just a little bit, and just kind of show you guys a little bit of what Sean brings to the table here.
I like his first name. Love his first name.
Yeah, spells it wrong, but it's all good. The first thing you'll see with this kid, though, Sean, is he is big and he's physical. Like big meaning like size wise. He's a real big, strong kid. I'll say this: as you watch this film, there's two things that are just tremendously problematic for this young man. Number one is he really doesn't know how to use his hands, and number two, for a short guy, he plays way too high. I mean, he almost stands. I mean, look at that. He stands straight up at the snap, and he does that constantly. And that's why I say, like, the projection right now is not great. He's going to have to improve the technique a lot. Like a snap like that against good players you're getting stoned. You're not coming at Rocco Spindler or Billy Christophic where you literally stand up and then go and expect to have success against anyone that's good. He's just bigger and stronger and more athletic than the people he's going against. That really says a lot about it. And so that's something that needs to get fixed, and he's going to need a lot of work on that. His hand play needs a lot of work. But what you can't teach, Sean, is the power that he brings to the table, the size, the natural girth. He's not a kid that's 300 pounds because he's fat. I mean, he's a kid that can completely reshape his body and still be over 300 pounds. I mean, he is a thick young man, very broad-shouldered. As I said earlier, tremendously big lower body. I mean, really thick lower body. You could even see it in sweats. When your legs look thick in sweats, he was wearing sweats today I saw him. When your legs look thick in sweats and they're not like tight sweats, you know what I mean? Like they're typical baggy sweats, but you still, you have a big lower body. And this young man certainly has that. He has good vertical quickness, Sean. I think he definitely flashes good vertical speed on film, comes off the line quickly. I don't love his lateral quickness. His change of direction isn't great, but he's a nose tackle. I mean, I'm not recruiting him to have him chasing down, outside zone all day. I think he's a kid that plays with a good motor. He just has to really work on. I mean, that play right there, Sean, like, look at here's the deal. This is a highlight play. Up, not quick off the ball, lets them get into his body. If he's going against, Anthony Knapp and Peter Jones, right? Or Gearby, he's getting whooped pretty good on those type of plays. And that's why you have to take his production with a little bit of a grain of salt. He's raw, in my opinion. This young man needs a lot of work, which shouldn't necessarily be a surprise when you know his background, but he's putting in the work. I mean, he's constantly tweeting out videos, and he certainly puts the work in the weight room. I think he's willing to work. It's just someone who just needs the coaching. And I think that's what Notre Dame is banking on. They're banking on that, hey, this is a kid that if he was coached well and did play with great leverage, he'd be a lot more dominant, and there might be some Bamas and, Georgia's in on him. And so I think that's something that you see from Notre Dame, but certainly has really nice, quick vertical speed.
Let me tell you something that he adds, in my opinion, from watching the film. It's an intangible. I think he plays with a good motor. I think he plays with attitude. I think he has a piece of nastiness on the inside that Notre Dame might not have on that defensive line. Notre Dame has some good players on the inside, but do they have that straight nasty guy on the inside? He's raw. He's going to get better, but he's always going to have that attitude. He's always going to have that motor. and you talk about projecting, not needing him freshman year when you have the two kids that you have coming in for the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And with Brendan Vernon, man, I don't know why his name's escaping me right now.
Boubacar or
Boubacar
Armel,
and
right?
Armel
Devin
coming
Houston,
in.
right?
Devin Houston comes back for his injury, so you have depth there. He comes in. You don't really need him like we need you to play immediately. No, you can sit down and we can put you on the Jason Onyé package. That's what we're going to put you on the Jason Onyé package. Different positions, but we're going to put you on that package and that road to let you develop. And when you hit, okay, fine. And I fully expect him by the time he gets to if he comes in early, by the time he gets to his second spring, I think he's going to be an impactful player because of his attitude and the ingredient that brings to that defensive line is something that's a little different than, like you said, for 20 to 25 plays is going to be needed. But I agree with you on everything you said physically about the assessment. Way too high technique. And to be that strong, if he can learn how to play with his hands.
Sean, I think that's where you nailed it, though, at the beginning of what you were just saying, though, is this kid brings I mean, you can't teach the size. You can't teach the strength. I mean, you can enhance the strength in the weight room, which they have. But, look, I don't care how hard I would have worked out in the weight room. I was never going to squat 600-700 pounds. That wasn't my body. That wasn't my potential from a strength standpoint, right?
Right.
The strength and the power has to be there. The other side, I say this about receivers all the time, right? I'm a receivers coach. I don't care if a kid knows how to run a route. That's what I get paid to do. I need to know that the kid has the speed, the foot quickness, the hips, and all those other types, instincts and all that. To your point, like that right there, this was like he's making plays, and it's like that's not really a highlight, but the tools are there, right? I mean, the strength is there. You see the really nice closing speed. Part of the reason he doesn't look, I think I've seen some people put stuff on Twitter like, oh, this kid changes direction well and he moves well laterally. I don't see that, right? But I don't care if he's a nose tackle. I need a guy that can be physical, that can hold up at the point of attack and can shoot gaps and penetrate and be disruptive. And he can do that when he is right. Now, the problem is he doesn't look overly quick off the ball for most of the snaps because he stands up and then goes. That's something that can be taught. There's some workout videos where you see him where his first step coming off the ball is really nice. I mean, it's really good because he's whoever's working with him is focusing on staying low, staying low, staying low. Once that starts to translate to the football field, he'll be even more impactful. Now, where I don't think he's going to be an impact player at Notre Dame is I don't see him being a productive player. It's one of those things where I don't see him being a 15 tackle for loss type of guy, and he's very productive in high school. The impact is going to be your linebacker, mate. Your middle linebacker had 9 solo tackles because they were on this kid double teaming him the whole game and couldn't get off the double team. That's what two gapping is. So basically, when we say a difference between a one gap and a two gap defensive lineman, let's explain that, especially as a nose. Two gap means I'm responsible for two gaps. I'm responsible for the A gap and the A gap strong, A gap weak, or I'm responsible for the A gap and the B gap to the strong or to the weak. You've got to hold your point, and then you've got to be able to get off and play and clog up both gaps. A one gap guy is like, hey, you're penetrating. You're responsible for the A gap weak or the A gap strong, one particular gap. Hey, you're slanting into the B gap strong or B gap weak. You're responsible for that. And that's what a 3-4 does. So a 3-4 defense, basically, you have 3 defensive linemen, but they're taking up 5 to 6 gaps because the way that they're playing. And then that's meant to occupy blocks, which allows your linebackers to run free. There's other ways to get your linebackers free. Penetration can help with that too, but it is nice to be able to have some stout guys that can just be physical and allow your linebackers to kind of run free. Guy that you can be a physical nose can just crash the A-gap hard, force the double team, and next thing you know, your 3 technique is stunting around, looping around on a twist, and he's getting free for a big play because your nose tackle is able to just push the double team back or keep those guys occupied. Those are the ways that a guy like him is going to be impactful. To me, Sean, if he is going to be impactful, is more of that to where his performance leads to production for other people. And then he'll occasionally have the tackles for losses and things like that. But it's more so about the impact that he's going to have, or he should have, hopefully has, as someone that's taken up a lot of space and eaten up a lot of space. I think that's really where I can see him having the bigger impact. But he's a work in progress. He's going to need time.
Yeah,
that's okay. honestly. I mean, that's fine. Notre Dame will have some guys that can play that position early on. And he's also the kind of kid, too, Sean, that if he's an early enrollee, the pad level thing you can have corrected enough where he can help you as a freshman.
Absolutely.
Is playing 5-10 snaps, giving you some big boy snaps. Because the thing about him is he won't need time to develop the size and strength to play in college. I mean, he's going to show up at Notre Dame with that. So like a guy like Jason Onye needed time in the weight room before he was ready to play, right? I mean, he was a basketball player, all that type of stuff. We've talked about that. He needed time to get from 245 to 295. I mean, that was just something that he needed. This is a kid that physically is going to be one of your stronger defensive linemen the minute he enrolls in campus. It's kind of like Charles Jagasaw. Like Charles Jagasaw doesn't need time to get stronger and bigger and all that. Charles Jagasaw needs to learn how to play the game of football better, like at a college level. That's where he needs to work, and that's where this kid is going to need to work as well. So there's definitely some tools, unique skill set, and that's why Notre Dame has made him a priority and decided to go the direction that they did. So they added Sean Sevillano to the class. Now Notre Dame has a 300-pounder for all of you that have been clamoring and complaining about they don't have enough 300-pounders. There you go. And it's funny. He's the first 300-pounder they've signed. They have some 300-pounders on their current team, but he's the first guy that committed or signed with Notre Dame that's 300 pounds since Aiden Keanana. That's the last time that Notre Dame had a guy that was 300 pounds when he committed to Notre Dame. So he certainly brings some beef. You don't have to pump him up to get him over 300 pounds.
From a defensive standpoint, the reason I point this out, we have seen his body types be used consistently by programs like BYU, Utah. They go get those guys in the middle. Might not be as athletic as a Bear Alexander or a Jalen Carter, but what they do in the scheme of the defense, they are trained to do that and be really good at it. And what it does is it frees. I think we saw this with the way Utah played. I think their big guys only played on first down, and immediately they would change the defensive line and go to more of a spread attacking defensive line, and then really loose their linebackers and started putting a lot of pressure on Caleb Williams. He hurt himself, and then Utah kind of took over the game. But it was really on the first down where they used their big guys to kind of stifle that run game, because ultimately when you watch USC, Lincoln Riley wants to run the ball. That's
he
what
wants to be balanced for sure.
He wants to be balanced for sure. That's really what killed Notre Dame, their ability to run the ball, because they were pressuring Caleb Williams early in that game,
right,
and getting to him.
Couldn't bring him down.
Running the ball is really what got Notre Dame on their heels. I think this guy is going to fit into that mold. I think he's going to fit into, like you said, this is your purpose. Early on, this is what we want you to do. We're going to give you first downs and some other type of package as you grow. I'm very interested when you start getting these big guys that Notre Dame hasn't had. How does that impact the defense moving forward? Because now you're talking about a guy like Al Golden or whoever the defensive coordinator might be in the future. These are tools that they haven't had at Notre Dame. And then that impacts your linebackers for sure,
right,
and their ability to go and make plays.
Well, Sean, one of the things I've said, you've heard me say this, I've joked, and I'm serious. I'm serious about the want, but I'm not serious about the consequences. I've joked that I would tell my defensive line coach, so you better go get me a Polynesian kid every year. Like, you better give me one Polynesian kid every year, or you're fired. Now, I'm joking about the fired part, but I'm not joking about the need for that kind of player. Well, what am I talking about? That tends to be where you get a lot of those short, big, physical, I don't know, like a team like Utah gets all the time, right?
Yeah.
And this kid's not Polynesian, I don't believe, but that's the body type that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is this kind of body type. You got Davion Dixon in the 2025 class. So I don't want a defensive line made up of only those dudes, but you do need those guys as part of your rotation.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we can all agree on. So you may not like the process of how they got here. My big issue with this is more about my evaluation of Owen Wafel. I don't see this kid as being a difference maker, an impact player, the productive player, high-level 4-star guy. I gave him a 3.5-star grade. But not every kid is recruited to be the next Bryant Young. Some guys are being recruited to recruit a very important role. And this kid is being recruited to play a very important role. It may not be the same role that Boubacar Traore was recruited to play, or Logan Thomas or Cole Mullins are recruited to play, where you're supposed to be more of a playmaker, or where what they want, they're not recruiting him to fill the role that they would otherwise get from Justin Scott. I think what this does do a little bit, though, is this lets Justin know, hey, anyone telling you that we're going to play you at the nose, this is evidence that we're not going to play at the nose, because we got a nose in this class now. And so that's what this kid's role will be. And if he does anything beyond that, that's great. But I think he gives you that thick, physical, I think nasty demeanor that you pointed out, Sean, the power and the girth that you need to have as a weapon against teams that really want to run the football. Yeah. And I think they didn't have that. They didn't have that big boy they could put in over the center last year when they needed to play big boy football. They always had to work on penetrating. Well, the problem with when you've got penetrators, only penetrators, is if certain guys miss gaps or if linebackers aren't able to do certain things, and it's big plays. Yeah. It's nice to be able to also throw someone in there that's going to make that center work a little bit just to get off the snap. And I think that's what this kid does.
Well, big weekend for official visits as Notre Dame gets their first official visit weekend started, and no better way than to start it with the commitment from a big man, Sean Sevillano Jr., Clearwater Academy International High School down in Clearwater, Florida. Next, I think we're going to get to the mailbag. Yeah. Free for all on Friday. Yeah. Let's do it. You know how we do it right here. Irish Breakdown.
That's right.
Let's rock. All right. Mailbag time. Michael Collins, we thank you for this question. Was Coach Golden a Coach Freeman hire, an administration hire, or is one of those questions, or a combination of both? Does Coach Freeman have full autonomy to replace any coach on the staff? Thank you.
Well, no coach in America has full autonomy to fire a coach. There's always certain contractual things that have to be honored, right? I mean, so if a coach, as long as there's no contractual things that prevent you from firing a guy or letting a guy go, then sure, right now he has that autonomy. Do I think that Al Golden's relationship with the fact that he's someone that Jack Swarbrick liked, do I think that factored into his decision? Yeah, I do. Do I think that he liked other people and he would have hired so-and-so if not for Jack Swarbrick liking Al Golden? No, I don't. Because I think if it was that kind of hire, you probably would have seen them push Al Golden out. I think Jack Swarbrick meddles too much in personnel decisions like this. But at the same time, it was Jack Swarbrick that also led the charge to bring in Chip Long and Mike Elko in 2017, not Brian Kelly. So if you're Jack Swarbrick, you're probably thinking, well, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And most people in his positions like his and, tend to have big egos, and it's earned a lot of times. And so I think he's going to feel like he's going to give his 2 cents on who they're going to hire. But the reason he can make the Tommy Rees move is because he didn't have a head coach at the time, which is partly why I think he made that move. But he's not going to walk in there if and Marcus Freeman's going to say, hey, I want to fire Al Golden, and Jack Swarbrick's going to be like, no. You probably have a conversation about, well, why? But AD should have that conversation, because I need to know if I need to protect myself from any potential, legal issues that might come from your decision to fire a guy. This is a termination of a contract when you fire a guy. To us, it's just football. Hey, you fire a guy and move on. But to an athletic director, we're basically violating our contract with this guy. There's consequences and repercussions of this. We need to make sure we do it the right way. And maybe we don't fire him. Maybe we say, hey, look, we'd like you to go find another job. Brian Kelly was the king of this. Brian Kelly was great at telling coaches that he wanted to fire, go find another job. And then he would help them find other jobs. So that way a guy left for a promotion and he wasn't fired. Like, when Urban Meyer, when Everett Withers left to go be the head coach of James Madison. Like, does anyone on the planet think that he had the option to go back to Ohio State that next year? No, he didn't. And that's how coaches will do it. And sometimes that's to say, hey, look, we're just going to look out for the coach. Other times it's more of legally, it just makes this easier for us. So you always have to get your athletic director's permission to fire a guy. I don't care if you're Nick Saban or somebody else, because Nick Saban doesn't get to wave a magic wand and make a contract go away. You need to know what the specifics are of how we're going to get out of this deal. That doesn't mean if Nick Saban doesn't want a guy gone that it doesn't get done. I'm just saying, like, you need to involve people in the process to say, hey, here's what we have, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do, and you go about that process. I think that's what Jack Swarbrick's role is now. Does Jack Swarbrick going to advise Marcus Freeman? Yeah, he is, because that's just who Jack Swarbrick is. Will Marcus Freeman listen to him at times? I'm sure he will. But at the end of the day, Marcus Freeman hired Al Golden. Marcus Freeman decided to keep Al Golden. So, short story long, that was a Marcus Freeman hire, in my opinion. And it's going to be up to Marcus Freeman to either get more out of Coach Golden, or if they don't this season, to then make a decision to go in a different direction.
The staff finally has one head coach.
You couldn't help yourself, could you? As soon as you said it, it just hit.
So I'm happy.
There's no one with full autonomy on one side of the ball over another.
So I'm happy to report that, but no, in all seriousness, you're just joking. In all seriousness, I will say this. I think Coach Freeman, or let me just start with Jack Swarbrick. I say this respectfully. I think Jack Swarbrick, in a lot of ways, is like Jerry Jones in the college football. He is in charge of the biggest brand in college football, just like Jerry Jones arguably is in charge of the biggest brand in the NFL. And they're both well-versed. They're both influential amongst their peers and respected amongst their peers. And he moves like that. They're very much engrossed in the business side.
He's a power broker.
He's a power broker. So, that's just and most people like that tend to meddle. They tend to meddle. And they both haven't won in a long time or haven't won a championship.
Well, in football, I mean,
yeah,
but we can't ignore it. He's been
can't ignore everything
for
else.
Lacrosse championships, women's basketball championships, fencing championships. So, look, here's my thing on Swarbrick. He drives me nuts with certain things. He really does. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to his desire to, like you said, to be like Jerry Jones, where I want to have my fingerprints and hire so I can feel. So if we win, I can kind of say to everybody, well, I had something to do with that hire. I told Marcus he should hire so-and-so. You know what I mean? Like, that's just who people like him are. But what frustrates me about people who are anti-Jack is that drives them nuts. And so they're anti-Jack Swarbrick. But I'm like, but you can't diss any AD at Notre Dame worth his grain of salt is going to have a little bit of that to him, because you need to be that arrogant, somewhat egotistical. I don't care what anybody else says. Yeah. This is what I believe in, because that's also why he's been able to hold off super conferences played such a huge role in holding off super conferences as much as he has. He's been able to swing a lot of weight in a lot of areas. Now he's going to have to finish his career off strong, because there's a lot coming at Notre Dame right now and the moves he's making, but he's done a lot of good things in that regard for Notre Dame. And so you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and because these things annoy you, and they do me, you can't also ignore all the other things that he brings to the table. And so for me, it's just, and if you're a head coach, you got to be smart and like, look, Sean, you know how it is, man. You got to stroke the ego sometimes.
Absolutely.
You got to say, oh, that's great. And you got to make them feel happy about themselves. And like, their opinions are very valued and all that. Because a lot of times they are, but it's just like, yeah, that's great. That's great. And then you walk in the door like, okay, now I'm going to go hire the guy that I want to hire. You know what I mean? Like, that's what Marcus Freeman's going to have to learn to do.
Yeah.
So the sooner he learns to kind of do that, I think the better he'll be as a coach. But to this question, Marcus Freeman wasn't going to hire Al Golden just because Jack Swarbrick wanted him to, in my opinion. I don't see that at all.
And I think any head coach would tell you of any big-time program that their position is political.
Sure.
In several ways. In several ways. And it's not just dealing with the alumni, it's dealing with the administration. like you said, you have to smile and deal with some stuff. And, there's a famous scene in one of my favorite series, The Wire, where the new mayor says, in came this group, in came this group, in came, and they all had a plate of manure for me to eat. And I had to eat it and smile. Like that is what it is to be in this position. And it's no different for a head coach. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think Nick Saban was on campus when Tommy came down for his visit. And
no, so they
talks.
did a Zoom interview. Him and Coach Saban did a Zoom interview before.
Right.
He let him. I mean, and basically a lot of the stuff was worked out in that Zoom. The trip was then more about, are you comfortable down here? Do you like it? Could you see yourself being here?
Yeah.
But all the other stuff was done in a Zoom call beforehand. But yes, you are correct. Saban was not on campus when Tommy Rees went down for his
Which means,
visit.
He could have met with the AD when he went down
Right.
there. Saban didn't have to be there for that. So, I have a lot of respect for what head coaches have to deal with. And they are CEOs in their own rights.
Yeah.
But no. Total autonomy. If Nick Saban doesn't have it.
Yeah. I mean, it just legally, you can't just do certain things that are in violations of signed contracts. At least you shouldn't be able to. I mean, that's just the reality. Otherwise, you can get sued and lose lot of money.
I would think the only big time sport where total autonomy might be more of a reality would probably be college basketball. Like there are some
used to be.
Yeah, back in the day, there are some college basketball coaches that I would say they absolutely had total autonomy.
For a long time, Bobby Knight was that way. For a long time, Jim Boeheim was that way. For a long, John Thompson was that way.
I would even say Dean Smith.
Oh, yeah.
At some point in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike Krzyzewski at Duke. John Thompson at Georgetown.
Yeah.
No question. There was no AD who was going to fire John Wooden. John Wooden would fire ADs, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Right. Let's be real about that. And football coaches used to be like that. Do you think the athletic director at Penn State ever had any say over what happened over Joe Paterno? Heck no. Which is partly what led to the problem.
To that detriment. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not trying to be flippant here, but like one person shouldn't ever have that much power. I mean, it should. That's why, I mean, not to have a political conversation, but that's why I like our form of government better than when it's done right. Better than most others, because there is no one person that can just do whatever the heck they want, right? There's always the checks and balances, and that's needed in athletic departments as well. And the athletic director is checked and balanced by the board, or if there's a strong president, which I don't believe Notre Dame has. So there's always a little bit of that, in my opinion, when it comes to those kind of hires. But that's a really good question, Michael, and one that I know a lot of people have thought a lot about.
The money changed all of that. Once big time money via TV contracts came into play, the administration said there's no way we're about to allow coaches to control all of this.
Because it's not about wins and losses anymore.
No,
it's not. It used to just be about, okay, we're dominant, and the money came from people being happy about the winning and losing. Because it was the money used to be coming from donors and boosters, and they were happy if you were winning. And so if a coach won, you can do whatever the heck you want. And he became that, especially like you said in basketball. It was like this in football for a long time too, where the head coach basically would be like, hey, I wield all the power here because the money that flows into the school is due to me and what we're doing in the football program. Once the tens and millions and eventually hundreds of millions are going to be coming the TV deals, hey, you're not the big money maker anymore in regard to, wielding power and getting people here. It's about the product that's on the field and being part of this, and that's where the power is now. And in some ways I think that's good, in other ways I think that's bad, but that's a whole different show, Sean. We could probably do a whole show on that one. So we'll move on to the next question.
John A1, thank you. Did Chris Smith's success in the 22 defense with his play style alter where Notre Dame is looking for in his prototype nose tackle? That's a good question.
It is, and this is the one I was referring to earlier. The reason I'll say that part of my initial gut reaction is like, well, no, that's why they brought Chris Smith in. But I don't think they thought Chris Smith was going to be the player that he was, to be honest with you. Like, he got a lot bigger and stronger at Notre Dame. Like, the Matt Bayless strength program did wonders for Chris Smith. He was like a 290-some pound guy at Harvard. And he ended up becoming like a 315 pound guy at Notre Dame who just got big because of, not because he was out like, eating Cheetos and stuff, but I mean, the weight room. You remember when we were at the pro day and you and I looked at each other like, do you see this kid's arms?
Arms? Yeah.
They're absurd. They're like this big. It was insane. Did like 37 reps on the bench.
Man.
I don't think that they anticipated Chris Smith being the player that he was. So maybe when he was that player and was able to do what he did, especially second half of the year, they're like, there's some value to having a guy like this to give us 15 to 25 snaps a game. Could be.
And he was good when he was in there.
Oh, yeah. And he got better and better and better as the year went on, and he got more comfortable with defense.
Yes. And that needs to say, well, that right there, what you just said, he got better. Being in an environment more competitive, he raised the bar because he was surrounded by competition. When you're at Harvard, I'm sure he played hard, but I'm sure the competition was nowhere near at the level he experienced. And a lot of kids can fold under that big of a change. He came in and embraced it. And you talk about Sevillano, if he can come in and embrace that, even with everything we feel like he needs to work on, he has tremendous value. Yeah, pointing back to what Chris Smith did, because we thought Chris Smith was just going to be depth. Like, oh, he's a good depth piece, And like you said, every time you saw him step on the field, it was like, oh, this kid. And then we saw him at the pro day, and we looked at his numbers, and we were like, all right, okay, way to put yourself in position to have a chance. Because that's all you can do. He put himself in position, coming from Harvard, getting to Notre Dame, where he had a better shot of getting to the next level than he would have if he had just tried to go from Harvard.
Yeah. All right. Good question, John. Very good question.
Rob Osgood, thank you for the question. Weird question for you. The NC State game will be a noon kickoff. As a coach, how do you prepare differently for an early game in comparison to a night game?
Oh, it's it's a good question, Rob. It's way different. And a lot of it has to do with, I think as a coach, I prefer, as far as preparation, I prefer the earlier starts, noon to 1 starts. I do. Yeah. Simply because you get up, you go to breakfast, you immediately head over, and you're getting right into prep for game. You're get over to the weight room. Get over to the training room, get in the locker room, get your stuff, get on the field, walk around. It is you are getting up and you are getting breakfast. And it's basically from the minute you get dressed, it's team function stuff. And then everything is clicking. You get breakfast, you go, you head over to the field, you get your equipment. You then go to we had to do that at the Division III level. You had to go get your jersey and stuff. That's placed in the lockers, at Notre Dame. But you go into the locker room, you put whatever stuff you need on to then go into the training room. You get your treatment, you get taped up, you get whatever, you need to do. Then you go back to your locker, you put your stuff to go out and do your walkthrough. You get out there and doing whatever you need to do, getting your mind right. You got headphones on, you're throwing the ball around, you're getting 1,000 catches in, whatever the case may be, kickers kick, whatever. And then you go back in, it's time to start getting prepped. You get dressed, you get your pads on, you do what you need to do. And then when you have on the board, you have the schedule for the morning on the board, specialists go out, QBs, receivers go out this time, O-line, D-line go out this time. Then you go out, you do your pregame, you come back, and then you go out and it's ready to go. It is structured, man. Yeah. When you're playing a 7:30 game, you're having breakfast, and then it's like, all right, fellas, enjoy the day. Don't do anything stupid. Yeah. Right? There's a lot of downtime. And so, where's your head that whole time? Are you focused on the game? Are you being silly? You can do things and be lighthearted and still be kind of, keep your mind right kind of thing. You shouldn't sit like in a corner with your headphones on for 12 hours getting ready for a game. And so, but you also can't be completely goofy and acting crazy and doing silly things before a game either. And it can be a challenge to be, especially for a road team, because like if you're at home, you can go back to your dorm, you can go back to your house after breakfast, after team meetings. When you're on the road, man, you're just kind of sitting in the hotel, you're trying to figure out things to do with them. So it is much harder to occupy time in the preparation. Now, once you arrive and it's time to go, the structure is exactly the same. The difference is you go from meal to it's time to let's start getting ready on a noon game. On a night game, it's you have your breakfast, and then it's like, what are you going to do for the next 12, 6, 7 hours before it is time to start ramping up. You'll have some team meetings and stuff, but you can't keep them occupied that entire time. Yeah. It's just impossible. I mean, when I mean occupied with structured things of preparation, because then you're putting too much on them mentally and physically. So it's a challenge, but it's a challenge for both teams.
And college football has always been, growing up, a noon 2:30 deal, noon 3:30. That was it. Prime time, of course, the prime time games, the big games. You love it. The anticipation all day. That's wonderful. But the tradition of college football is noon, 3:30, and by the time you hit 6 o'clock, you're talking about everything that's happened throughout the day. And the walk on different campuses to the stadiums for those teams, with the sun up and all. That's the tradition of college football. So, yeah, I'm right there in that pocket for the noon kickoff. I think the only people on the staff that might benefit from the primetime kickoffs would be the training staff. If they're trying to get somebody ready, that gives them maybe a little more time to get a kid ready. Rather than if they had played at noon, this kid can't play. He's playing at 7 o'clock. Coach, maybe
you can do a few rounds of treatment. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. Yeah, you can definitely do that.
Nathan Milton, thank you for the question. What was the most exciting Notre Dame game of the 22 season? Last 10 years, and since you have been watching Notre Dame?
Well, since I've been watching Notre Dame, it's Miami Notre Dame 88. I mean, that's still, I was 10, but that's still the most exciting game I've ever watched. I think 93 Florida State was somewhat close, but that was a very entertaining game. I mean, those were great games. I'm trying to think some more. Michigan, what was the year they beat? What was the year under Davey that they beat it? Was it Davey? They beat a really good Michigan team. It was the year after they won the title. That was a pretty entertaining game. I mean, so some USC 05, it ended terribly, but that was an incredibly entertaining game, in my opinion. So those are some of the ones from all time, Sean. You thinking of some more?
Most exciting game for me was the Clemson game in 22. Without question.
You mean the most exciting game of the 22
season? Of the 22
season,
okay. Yes.
Agree completely on that one.
This Clemson game. Last 10 years, since you said 10 years, I think that 2012 season slips out of that because it's been longer than a decade. Yep. So that would put me probably, I could throw the Clemson game at home during the pandemic. I could say that, but for me, look, Trevor Lawrence wasn't playing, so I really, I'm going to say, and it is a loss, but I remember this because it was the night of my mother's birthday dinner, and I kept sneaking away from the table. 2014 Florida State was an incredible, you talk about an exciting football game. It was absolutely amazing. And even though they took the game away from Notre Dame at the end, that game gave me everything I wanted in a Notre Dame big-time matchup and big-time football game. Since I've been watching Notre Dame, 88 has to stick up there. Florida State, though. That Florida State game in 93.
Yeah. I think the USC game from 17 was a lot like that. Exciting. Because they just jumped all over USC early, and the crowd was just loving it.
Electric.
I was watching the highlights of that again the other night. Just from the start. You go 3 and out. Brandon Wimbush has Josh Adams wide open on a check down that if he throws it to him, Josh has got just green grass and green turf in front of him. Doesn't get it. They punt. They go back the next series. Tavon just rips it away from Sam Darnold, and the route was on. And that was a pretty exciting game. The 2015 Notre Dame USC game might have been the most, because one of the questions I often get asked is what's some of the loudest environments you've ever been a part of? And I think that 15 USC game was really wild. That was a really entertaining, because if you remember, Sean, that game didn't start off really well.
No, it didn't.
Quarterback came out.
They moved the ball down the field.
Just right down the field, man. It was a Cody Kessler, right? Was their quarterback on that year?
Yeah.
Just do, bam, touchdown. And you're like, well, this is interesting. And then that very next play, Deshaun throws a poster out to Will Fuller, and you're like, and for a 75-yard touchdown, and they literally thought they could have a Dory Jackson defend Will Fuller. They really thought that they could do that. And obviously that didn't didn't work out really well for them. But, just that game was just exciting. I mean, you had the block punt for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Notre Dame jumped on USC early. They're up 21-10 early. You had some big plays. USC comes back and ties it. Remember that they had a 75-yard touchdown pass on the fake where Juju Smith actually threw it to Jalen Green, or I forget which way. And then you had the long run by Ronald Jones, by Dory Jackson, the long play by Dory Jackson. They ran a screen and Notre Dame missed, and he went for, and next thing you know, it's 24-24. USC then takes a 31-24 lead in the fourth quarter. Notre Dame comes back. They go ahead and win the game. That was a pretty loud and intense game. It was a back and forth game because the 17 game was loud, but it wasn't an exciting game after like the second quarter. It was like, okay, this one's over. You enjoyed it, but the 15 game to me was even more exciting. I thought that was a really intense game.
Yeah. The 88 season, you can do the Michigan game in 88 is a classic. Yeah. A classic. Just two teams, heavyweight fight. It's like Ali Frazier.
Old school football.
We're just going to stand in the middle of the ring and just hit each other.
Yeah.
For 4 quarters.
You know what? The best example of what the Lou Holtz, Bo Schembechler games were? To me, it's not Holyfield, Muhammad Ali and Frazier. It's Hagler Hearns, man.
Oh yeah.
That is call. Just like, I mean,
go at it. Haymakers from the start.
Yes. I mean, from jump. Like, there's no way this fight's going 12 rounds.
Was that Oscar McBride we talked to? Who was that we spoke to and they said, yo, that Miami game, we knew we could physically push them around.
Yeah, that was O.
And they were like, yo, but that Michigan game?
Yeah.
was a totally different
Michigan
piece.
was always a very physical team.
Man.
Very physical team. Yeah. So
good question, Nate.
Another really exciting game, Sean, that I'm reminded of is I'd say the 18 Michigan game in the first half was really exciting. The second half was kind of a little bit more boring. But I'm gonna tell you a really sneaky, entertaining, exciting game that a lot of people don't talk about is the Virginia game in 2015. We don't talk about it a lot because it's the game that Malika hurt, but that was a really good football game, and that Virginia crowd was intense. I mean, it was intense. Notre Dame jumped on them early. Virginia came back. I mean, and I guess maybe game. It was
very exciting. Yeah, very exciting.
That might also be a bit of a bias for me because Virginia has has an outdoor press box, so we were like in it. I mean, we can hear the energy, and normally we can't. So perhaps there's a little bit of bias there, but that was a really if you just and this is one from not 10 years ago, but. I hate how it turned out. Really hate how it turned out. The 2011 Michigan Notre Dame game was very entertaining, but one that talking about excitement, the we don't talk enough about because it was terrible for a half. But the second half against Michigan State in 06 was one of the most exciting halves of football I've seen because they were down like 31-10 at one point in time in that game, something crazy like that. And came back and won. What were they down? I'm going to look that up real quick, Sean. What were they down? It was like 31-10, 38-17, something like that.
Yeah, that was what? Drew Stanton? Was that Drew Stanton?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe Drew Stanton was the quarterback. Yeah. He was in. They didn't throw for much that yard. Remember Matt Trannon threw a touchdown pass that game?
Yeah.
But yeah, they were up.
There were a lot of turnovers, and they just took advantage of certain things early.
It was 31-14.
Yeah.
It was 24-7 in the second quarter, then at 31-14 at halftime.
Yeah.
It was 37-21 going into the fourth quarter. And Notre Dame scored 19 unanswered points in the fourth quarter. That was once it went down to, if you think about it, it was 24-7 midway in the third quarter. Notre Dame outscored them 33-13 the rest of the way.
Yeah.
That was and you're doing it in the rain. Brady's throwing dimes in the rain and the wind. And hitting John Carlson over the middle, hitting Rama on just one of the most perfectly placed fade routes you're ever going to see. Samardzija with the catch and the slant, stopping in the rain, letting the guy go fly, and cuts it back outside, and then the pick six to end it all. Yeah,
and then the pick to really end it on the sideline there where it bounced off.
Who caught that? Was that Chinadum? Who caught, or was it Terrell caught that one too?
I think that was Terrell that caught that one too. Yeah.
That was a very entertaining second half of a game. There is no doubt about that. That was a fun second half. Very fun second half. I like questions like that. Thank you, Nathan. That's a good one.
Thank you for the super chat, Tyler Evans. Top 3 games you can't watch this upcoming season, but it can't be a Notre Dame game.
I think he meant you can't wait to
Can't
watch.
wait to watch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it can't be a Notre Dame game. There's some really good non-conference games this year that I'm looking forward to, Sean. Obviously Texas and Alabama is one that I'm very curious about. I think the first couple weeks of the season, Sean, has some great games. I think I'm really looking forward to the LSU Florida State game. Really looking forward to that game. That's going to be a big one for me.
In August, that is a sleeper in my opinion, because I think it's really pivotal. The Gators going out to Utah.
Yep, that's going to be a very interesting
That's
one.
telling for both teams, because I think Utah, once again, is going to compete. They get a lot of people back. They were really young, especially defensively last year. Their running back was a guy that came in and they moved him from the defensive side of the ball, and they eventually ended up being very productive. I think they're going to be a really good team, more mature, ready to go. They're looking to be in the running for the college football playoff in this season. I think they get
Andy about Utah.
Yes, they get Andy Ludwig,
and no one talks about them.
Yeah, no one talks about them.
Back-to-back Pac-12 champs, and everybody talks about Washington, Oregon, and USC.
Yeah, and they get Florida coming in, who beat them down in the swamp with Richardson last year. So I think that's one I'm going to enjoy watching.
They had so many chances to win that game.
They definitely had
so many chances to win that game. 2 games that pop out to me, Sean, that are conference games that I'm very intrigued by. I mean, there's tons, but 2 for me are, number 1, Florida State Clemson.
Yeah,
this is going to be a game that is saying, okay, it's kind of like, Clemson's that old grizzled vet, right? That hey, we've dominated this conference for a decade. We won't deal with you, little upstart. But Florida State, that team's like, hey, we don't care that you dominated the league the last 10 years. We dominated it for 20 before that. And it's a battle for supremacy in the conference. And, Clemson's obviously dominated that matchup in recent seasons. And honestly, it was the Clemson-Florida State game. What was it, 2015? Was it 2014? I think that was the one where you kind of like, okay, Clemson's for real. Like this isn't the same Clemson team that we've seen in the past. It was that really grinded out game in 15 at Clemson that you started to be like, okay, it's like this isn't the same choke artist, because Florida State had won 3 in a row. They'd blown them out a couple times and they'd choked some games away, and Clemson and Florida State was coming off. They had won a national title in 13. They made a playoff appearance in 14. The year that they won the national championship, they absolutely obliterated a really highly ranked Clemson team. I mean, just destroyed them. And that was sort of like a passing of the torch, so to speak. And Clemson hasn't lost to them since. I mean, literally has not lost to them since. Last year was really the first time they'd even played in a competitive game since 2016. And so is the torch going to get passed again? Or is it just now we've got 2? Like, is Florida State coming up as Clemson's going down? Or is it finally going to be, okay, we have 2 heavyweights in the ACC this year? And so you play that off the backdrop of, if, let's say, Florida State beats LSU and then Clemson beats Florida State, and they're both 10-2, 11-1, you start to get into the notion of, hey, maybe the ACC is not just Clemson and everybody else anymore. There's 2 great teams. Or is Florida State going to be the final blow that says, Clemson, you're going down now? My hope is that they both look like powers this year. I think it's better that the ACC be better.
Yeah.
But that's an interesting game. And then the other conference game for me, Sean, is Michigan-Ohio State. I am really curious to see how Ohio State responds to what happened to them the last 2 years. I mean, I thought it was going to be. I thought you're at home. They embarrassed you, and then Michigan ran their mouths the entire offseason. Jim Harbaugh, senior head coach, was born on third base, so to speak. I'm like, where's your pride? And they just let Michigan do that to them in the second half. It just
this might be the first time going into that matchup, because I'm telling you how I'm feeling right now on June 2nd. I don't know how I'm going to feel on that last Saturday in November. But as I sit right now, I feel like Michigan has the better team. I feel like Michigan has the better team.
Better team, yes. More talented
not
team.
talent.
Better
No.
team. Yeah.
I feel like Michigan has the better
You're
team.
talking like culture built around.
It doesn't matter what Ohio State does.
Yeah.
When they face off, they have the form. They have the better team. And that is going to be telling because I expect Ohio State to have at least one loss in South Bend when they walk up into Michigan Stadium. Mm-hmm. And that game is going to mean a lot for the direction of that program. Yeah. A lot. And if Jim Harbaugh wanted to put the proverbial nail in the coffin of Ryan Day, he would go a long way to possibly making that happen. If they especially if they beat them the way they beat them the previous 2 years. Oh,
or you just out physical them really for 4 quarters.
Yes.
I mean, the only reason any of those games are even close is because Ohio State could still make big plays in the pass game. I mean, that's really the only reasoning. I mean, like we have Archer's talked about this in the show. Well, hey, it was close at this point. Sometimes those things can be misleading. Like Ohio State fans will say that about the Notre Dame game. Well, it was misleading, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's true of that game too. It was never as close as the score showed. The second half, Michigan absolutely dominated Ohio State. Both. It's kind of like when Ohio State did that to Michigan in, I think, Harbaugh's first year. Was it his first year? It was like 13-10 at halftime, but you were watching that game and you're like, this is not a close game.
No, Michigan.
And then the second half, and Ohio State went out and just ran them. Yeah. Another game like that, Alabama-Michigan State playoff game. It was like 7-0 at halftime, but you're like, this is not a 7-0 ball game. Alabama should be up 24. And then the second half, what does Bama do? They pull like 30 on them in the second half. Sometimes the score is not always indicative of how the game is being played, and Michigan just out-physical Ohio State. So what's the culture of Ohio State? How do they respond to that? Especially, Sean, to your point, if you're correct and they have a loss at that point in time, they're playing for their playoff survival. If that doesn't get you amped up and ready to play, then I don't know what does. And I think it's only fitting that they broke the streak, or that that you break the streak basically at their place. It started at their place, right? They embarrassed you at their place. Now you break it at their place and kind of get that redemption in that regard. I just don't know after last year. I don't have as much faith in Ohio State to get it done. I think Ohio State will be a better team this year, but I don't know if they're going to necessarily have a better record than they did last year because of those 2 games being on the road. Yeah. And I think Penn State's going to be better this year than they were last year in a lot of ways as well. So it's going to be interesting. It's a big year because the one thing people will say about Ryan Day is, well, he's still like 45-6. And you're absolutely correct. But this is the danger. That was the reason they couldn't fire Cooper for so many years, despite Ohio State fans wanting him gone, is because he kept winning every year. Yeah. But he had those 2 down years. He went 8-4 and 6-6, and he was out. Yeah. So if you're Ryan Day, you keep going 11-2 every year, you're going to stay around because you're really good. But you have that year where you stub your toe and drop down to 9-3, and all of a sudden those calls get a lot louder. I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that's just the reality of it. But just simply losing to Michigan, no. But if they have that disaster of where you lose to all 3 of the good teams you play, that could, because I don't know what's worse for Ohio State fans, losing to Michigan or losing to Notre Dame. Because Michigan's your rival. Notre Dame's a team you have zero respect for. Like you just think they're beneath you, and if you were to somehow lose to both of them in the same year, I would not want to hang out in the state of Ohio much if that were to happen, Sean, at all.
I would love to walk through Ohio if that happened. Yeah. With a bullhorn right in the middle of campus.
Oh my goodness, that'd be dangerous for you.
Yeah, it would.
You'll probably want me by your side, right? I imagine with
with your microwave, as we call it sometimes.
Heat it up real quick, baby.
John A1, with the addition of Carter II, what are the chances ND fields 2 starting ND caliber safeties in 23? How many secondaries can stack up with ND if it has 2 good players at safety?
I mean, I think if the safety rotation is simply Xavier Watts doing what he did the last 4 games, Ramon Henderson being who he was last year, and DJ Brown being who he was last year, this is still one of the 5 best secondaries in college football because of how good the corners are. And look, I know the safeties aren't great, but they weren't bad last year. There's this notion like they were bad last year. They weren't. They weren't great by any stretch, but they weren't bad. If Antonio Carter or Ramon Henderson, because Carter could be that guy, but if let's say Ramon Henderson finally kind of the light goes on for him, man, it's top 3 secondary potentially. I mean, there's still something. Look, Cam Hart's got to be more consistent. He's got to stay healthy, and Benjamin Morrison has to avoid the sophomore slump. And there's a lot of things go into it, but potentially it could be a top 3 secondary next year. Plus, Thomas Harper's a part of my thought process on how good the secondary is going to be as well, because they're going to play a lot of nickel this year, and I have a lot of faith in him. So they have depth, they have talent, they have high impact talent. I honestly think the safety position is going to be more defined by Xavier Watts than a second guy emerging. If the other 3 guys are just solid as part of the rotation, but Xavier's a dude, that makes them better. Now, ideally, you'd like 2 guys to step up and be dudes, right, Sean? I mean, I get that, but I'm just trying to have more of a realistic conversation. That's kind of how I look at it, Sean. What are your thoughts on that?
Where you're talking about a young man that you feel like is still ascending. So the expectation with Xavier Watts is, look, he has this vibe on him where he's just a playmaker. He's just a playmaker. I think the play he made in the Gator Bowl where he pretty much it was a touchdown. He gets his fingertips on the ball and passes it and knocks it down. That you see that and you're like, okay, that's the type of play that he has in him. And if he can be more consistent, that's going to help out. Consistency is what we're looking for from the young man, because we know the level of play, because we've seen it. But we just need him to be more consistent. And him being more consistent could lead to what we asked for with the defense creating more turnovers, because he has that type of ability to be able to go ahead, make plays on the ball, knock balls out of ball carriers' hands, create fumbles. He just has that vibe to be around the ball and make plays. Because anytime he goes over to the offense last fall when they had him, he was making 50-50 catches over DBs. He's just a playmaker, man.
Right.
He's just that type of kid. So I agree. Ramon, for me, is a kid. He's the type of kid that you just pull for because you're like, yo, this kid has so much ability. If the light goes on and he finally gets it or it finally clicks, Notre Dame could really have something. So, those 2 guys for me are the first safeties on my list that I want to see take a step forward. The transfers in are really are good players. And they give you stability in mind. Stability, they give you the same stability of DJ with a little bit more athleticism, if that makes sense. Right? Because DJ is just that consistent. He's going to be in the right place, make the right call, do what he's supposed to do, be a leader. But it's like, man, DJ, if you were just a little bit faster and a little bit rangier, you would be everything we could want at safety at Notre Dame. But unfortunately, he's not. So that's a good question. That's a good question. I think the safety position, we talked about this yesterday, right? I think safety position has been vastly underrated at Notre Dame.
Yeah. Agree.
I think
part of it is because the only time you tend to see safeties is a lot of times is when they're making a mistake.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mike Reddy, thoughts on the SEC stand with an 8-game schedule in 2024? I think it's a disgrace that they are unwilling to play all of their rivals every year.
I don't know about the rivals part because I don't know enough about the makeup of the 8. So I'm simply saying I literally don't know enough to comment on that. I think it's total chicken you-know-what that they're playing 8 games. I'm so sick of this. Well, we play a tougher conference schedule. No, you don't. The teams in the East definitely don't, right? This whole, we're so much better. Based on what? NFL draft. Like, look, you guys are constantly having disappointing years recently. Like, there was a time 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago where the SEC was just here and everybody else was way down here. I mean, they were just dominant. It's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times we got to watch Ole Miss just go get outclassed in a major bowl game by Baylor or, a team like that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm so over this whole, well, we shouldn't have to play anybody out of conference because of this. Now, there are some teams in the SEC that are more than willing to play teams. Georgia did a home and home with Notre Dame, right? They played Clemson a lot over the last 10, 15 years, right? And when Clemson was good, they would play. They've played Boise State back when nobody else outside of Oregon and Washington were willing to play Boise State, right? So I got respect for some of those teams. LSU has had some decent non-conference games. Auburn has been willing to go out to USC and play USC. They've been willing to play some tough teams. They played Clemson recently.
They go to Penn State this year, don't
right.
they? Auburn?
Because then they got beat at home by Penn State last year.
Yeah.
So, I'm so over this, but the media allows them to do it. I mean, you're a 16-team league, and you're not even going to play half the teams in your league. What are you a 16-team league for at this point in time? Like, and how are you going to sit there and tell me that? Because here's the thing that drives me nuts. Well, the strength of schedule is, to me, I have a problem with the strength of schedule because the strength of schedule almost kind of like gives you brownie points for being an SEC team.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at the strength of schedule on ESPN, on the FPI, and Notre Dame and Texas were the only two non-Big Ten or SEC teams in the top 20.
Wow.
Right. And partly the reason that Texas is in the top 20 is why? Because they're playing at Alabama.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it is. And then, of course, Notre Dame's is different because they play so many Power 5 teams. But I just get so tired of this whole, well, you're telling me the strength of schedule before we've played a single game is such that the SEC and the Big Ten are this dominant conferences. Well, you're assuming that to be the case. And that's why I think a lot of people have said the expansion to a 12-team playoff is going to be unfair because the SEC and this, that, and the other. First of all, I don't think the SEC is going to get 6 or 7 teams in there. I think they're going to get 3. The Big Ten is going to get 3, and then there's going to be 6 others. And I think what's going to happen in a lot of those is some of these teams are going to get exposed as you're not quite as good as you actually thought you were, but you're able to sort of get the same matchups year after year after year after year, and you didn't have to go out and play this style of play.
Yeah.
I don't say Alabama because I don't want to make it seem Alabama's a phenomenal program, but like there's been things they've been able to avoid. They've been able to avoid some of the conferences that are maybe doing things that could give them some problems back when those conferences were really good. Like they didn't play a lot of Big 12 teams when the Big 12s were high octane. They did play Oklahoma once in a bowl game. Do you remember what happened in that game with Trevor Knight at quarterback? Oklahoma worked them in that bowl game. This is in the middle of Alabama being great since I think the 2013 season, if I remember correctly. So, my whole thing is, Sean, is I just think it's ridiculous and absurd that they're a 16-team league is only playing 8 regular conference games. And it'd be one thing if you're going to say, hey, look, we're going to only still play 8, but what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of the FCS game in November. Okay, I don't like it, but okay, at least you're doing that.
Right.
But they're not even willing to do that. So it's not like that 9th game is, them going to play Notre Dame or Oklahoma or, well, I guess Oklahoma being the league, Ohio State or Indiana, Illinois, Washington State.
When does
Savannah State?
When does that Bama Notre Dame series starts? When 27?
27 and 28, I think is when it is.
Yeah.
But it's like those aren't the games you're keeping, that you're adding by not playing a 9th game. No, you're doing this so you can play Mercer and Savannah State and Prairie View and Jacksonville State and pick a FCS school from the Southeast, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what you're doing. And it's
how about this? How about making Bama and Georgia actually play during the regular season? How about that?
Right.
Do that instead of setting up your championship game every year.
Right.
Make Bama and Georgia actually play each other.
Yeah.
Michigan and Ohio State play each other every year.
Every year, Ohio State has to play Michigan State, Penn State every single year. Every year. And Michigan has to play Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State. So, yeah, I mean, it's and it's actually the team that they cater to the most is Georgia, because Alabama isn't. You can't judge it. I don't judge Alabama negatively because they don't have to play Georgia every year, because they have to still play LSU and Arkansas and A&M and Ole Miss and Mississippi State, and it's still a tough league. But Georgia for the last 7-8 years, the SEC East has been, and
have you seen the schedule this year?
It's ridiculous. It's not as bad as Michigan's, but it's bad.
I think once they play Ole Miss and Tennessee back to back. Like that's like the 9th and 16th of November.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the season.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is their schedule. They open up with 4 straight home games. They play UT Martin, Ball State, South Carolina, and UAB. Then they play at Auburn, then home against Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, bye week, neutral field against Florida, Missouri at home, and then you play at Ole Miss, at Tennessee, at Georgia Tech. So you're talking about Tennessee. You're talking about Georgia doesn't have to play any of the top 3 teams. I would argue 2 of the top 3 teams in the the top 3 teams in the West. They don't have to play, like traditionally speaking. They don't have to play Alabama. They don't have to play LSU. And they don't have to play Texas A&M. They don't have to play Arkansas. Like it is – actually, I'm curious about this. How often do Georgia and LSU play in the regular season? Because I know Alabama and Georgia don't play very much.
Now, Georgia and LSU have had some really good games when they have played.
So the last time they played in the regular season was 2018. The last time they played, and that was LSU whooped them in that game. Before that, the last time they played in the regular season was 2013, and then before that, they didn't play. So since Brian Kelly was hired as the head coach at Notre Dame in 2010, Georgia and LSU have played each other twice in the regular season, twice. And I'm gonna look here real quick because I think Georgia has not played Alabama but a couple times either in that stretch. Let me go to their Alabama regular season matchups as well. So Georgia and Alabama since 2010 have played in the regular season twice, 2015 and 2020. Actually, before the 2015 game, the last time they played in the regular season was 2008. That's intentional. That's absolutely intentional. So since Brian Kelly was hired as the head football coach in Notre Dame in 2010, 13 seasons have passed. LSU and Alabama have played. Georgia has played Alabama and to LSU a grand total of what, 4 times in the regular season. So I can't stand it. But it's hard for me with some of these other teams. Like how do you as the Big Ten make that argument when you look at Michigan's non-conference? I mean, that's as bad, in my opinion. So there was something I saw yesterday too, Sean. I'm going to find this tweet. I think it was. I don't remember who it was, but I wonder. I think I might have liked it. Let me see if I did. I hope. Yes, here it is. This is a tweet from a guy that covers Iowa football for The Athletic. This is the teams in each conference that are playing 10 or more Power 5 opponents in 2003. So teams that in your 12 games, you're playing 10 or more Power 5 teams. The ACC, which in this instance included Notre Dame, 10 out of 15. The Big Ten is 13 out of 14. The Big 12 is 11 out of 14. The Pac-12 is 10 out of 12. The SEC is 2 out of 14. So, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Yep. Anyway.
Look, as long as the way I see it, if Michigan and Ohio State have to play every year, the gosh darn it, Alabama and Georgia should be playing every year.
Yeah.
Now,
I'll somewhat give Bama a pass. My issue is more with Georgia because Alabama does play Tennessee every year in a crossover, every single year.
Facts. And LSU.
Well, but they're in the same division. I'm talking about in the crossover.
In the crossover, but I'm just saying that's a tough game. That's a tough game.
Most of my life, Tennessee was a tough game. It was a good team.
Yeah.
Georgia's the one I have the bigger issue with. That they don't have like a common. I mean, they've got in-state, like in-division rivals, Florida, Tennessee, but so does Alabama with LSU and all those other teams. The fact that they don't have like you said, okay, so we don't make them play the same team every year, but they need to play like one of Alabama, LSU, A&M every year, something like that. Like, to me, that's something that they should do.
Yeah.
But we don't see that happen. We see them get Mississippi State a lot.
Yeah.
But and I don't fault Georgia for this, because Georgia on their own has shown a willingness to schedule well out of conference. I mean, they play Georgia Tech every year. They've scheduled home and homes at Notre Dame. They scheduled home and homes at Clemson. It's not Georgia that I find it annoying. It's the SEC.
Yeah.
And the way that they do the schedule.
Yeah.
So that's. And I'll be willing to bet you $20 if you could get Kirby Smart on a sort of a back channel. Well, I don't know if Kirby Smart would feel this way, but yeah, you might. I think that he would even say that I don't know that that's necessarily good for us. It may be different now that they've won 2 titles, and he's just like, hey, look, let's just get back to the playoff. But I bet you he would have, early in his career especially, would have said, hey, we need those kind of tests to get us ready. I'd bet you Nick Saban would be more willing to schedule tougher out of conference if he didn't have to play LSU and Arkansas and A&M and Ole Miss every year. I'd bet you he would change his out of conference schedule. I'm not saying I like the way he schedules out of conference, but I'm saying I think he would be more willing to change it if they didn't have to have that gauntlet in the West every year.
They're competitors. If you're a competitor, you want to play against good teams. So I agree with you.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
All right, let's get down to some other questions here. We'll mix it up here a little bit. Here's one from Stevie Wonder.
Stevie, thoughts on Tommy Ike as a player now? Indy never pushed for him. He stated this. Indy's class that year was Aceta, JD, Jack, and Maris.
Look, I'd have had no problem with them taking Tommy Eichenberg back then. No problem. I liked Tommy coming out. I didn't think he was going to be an all Big Ten linebacker like he's become. He was a good player. I'd have taken him. What I don't like to do, Sean, is I don't like to do hindsight 2020 stuff when I didn't have that opinion then. Like, I'll gladly hammer Notre Dame for stuff that I told you this is what I thought, and you should have taken this kid, and it turned out to be accurate.
Yeah.
What I will never do is go back and hammer them for kids I also didn't think were good. So like when they passed on George Karlaftis, I've never hammered Notre Dame for that, because I didn't have a problem with them passing on George Karlaftis. I didn't think he was going to become what he became. So I'm not going to crush Notre Dame for a bad evaluation when I made a bad evaluation, and same thing at linebacker. I loved Jack Lamb as a player. Loved Jack Lamb. Now, first of all, actually, he's talking about Jack Kaiser. So I would say, going back, that I probably would have taken Tommy Eichenberg over JD Bertrand. I would have. And I would, coming out of high school, I would have. Jack Kaiser's a different player. I actually liked Jack Kaiser a lot. I'm actually going to try to pull up my rankings right now of how I had that class ranked, just so I can kind of refresh my memory. But I would have taken – Osita was always a high upside guy. I had some issues with Osita as a player. He was very raw. I'm not super surprised he hasn't really panned out at Notre Dame. I think he was more talent than he was necessarily a great talent. I'm going to see if I can find these classes. Where are they? I got all these files and stuff with all these rankings from players, and I'm trying to find what my old rankings were. So that would be the 19 class. So Maris was my highest ranked linebacker in that class. And so, I didn't even have Osita in the top 10 of that class. So I would have been fine. JD was my lowest ranked guy of that class. So I'd have been fine looking back at my grades then if they would have taken Tommy Eichenberg over JD Bertrand then. But, Maris Lufeld, I love that kid's potential, dude. I loved Maris's potential coming out, Sean.
One of the things that I say all the time, as much as we can sit here and grade these young men and talk about upside, there are certain traits of these young men that you can't put a score on it. It's just, there was something about Tommy Eichenberg that we couldn't score, that we didn't know was on the inside of him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, ultimately, when you get there, you're the best of the best from around the country. These young men decide their fates. They decide how much work they're gonna put in and the type of player they're going to be. And that's something that's outside of our control, whether it's fans or evaluators. And Tommy Eichenberg is just one of those kids. So where we can sit here and say, you know what, I didn't really have him, he didn't check out the way he's played it out at Ohio State. But tip my cap to the kid, because he has become an absolute great linebacker at Ohio State, and he's going to play on the next level. I didn't exactly see that when I was looking at his high school film, but man, kudos to the young man. And that's the beauty of college football.
I liked him. Like I said, I take him over JD. I didn't see a guy that was going to be an all Big Ten linebacker. I didn't see that. So I'm not going to sit there and crush it. Like, how could you pass on Liam's younger brother? And I knew then that he was going to be great. I didn't know he was going to be this good back then. So I'm not going to hammer him for it. But I think Tommy's turned into, he's smart. He's a good athlete too. I mean, that's the thing is like, he's not just winning with smarts and toughness. He's also a pretty good athlete. And that's where I thought he was lacking a little bit. I just didn't see that explosiveness. So kudos to him for putting in the work and becoming that kind of player. But I would have definitely taken him. Also partly because I thought Liam was a heck of a player, and I like when brothers, get to go to the same school, right?
John Leahy, thank you for the question. On3 reported Caleb Beasley has locked in an official visit for the Ohio State game. This seems to go against ND policy. Is this Beasley hoping for more NIL money, or is a decommitment coming?
First of all, that visit is well over 2 months away. We have all of June, all of July, all of August, and then most of September. So almost 4 months away from happening. So I'm just going to give you 4 words, man. Let it play out. And that's all I'm going to say on that one. He knows the policy. The policy isn't going to change. So we'll see. Just let it play out. And I wanted to bring this up, even though I'm not technically answering it, but I know that a lot of people thought it. So I'll just say, like I said, just let it play out, and then we'll see. If he makes it on campus in September, then we'll have our answer. But remember the kid from Texas last year, the cornerback Calvin Simpson Hunt, scheduled an official visit to Notre Dame, and it got canceled last minute because he was unwilling to decommit, and they said, we're not bringing you up if you're not willing to decommit. So, and he wasn't willing to decommit until he knew where he was going to go. And Notre Dame doesn't do that. So just let it play out. Let it play out. All right. Here's a funny one. Rob Osgood says, for Brian, a quick Scott Satterfield note. He was my quarterback in high school, Hillsboro Orange. Let's just say I was a part of a few Olay blocks as an O-line tackle. That's awesome.
Rob, that's bogus,
does
Rob.
Not shock me from everything I've ever heard about Scott Satterfield. It does not shock me at all.
Oh, man.
At all. I just find him and Eli Drinkwitz were probably 2 guys that I just would have wanted to slap in the face if we played high school ball together. They just rubbed me the wrong way. Really rubbed me the wrong way. And I like Satterfield coming out of App State. I thought he did a really nice job. His teams played well. I just never really heard him talk. And then you listen to him talk at Louisville, and you're like, is this guy literally talking down his team and like blaming everyone else for like why things are not going good? You're at Louisville, dude. You know what I mean? Like if you can't get recruits at Louisville, that's a you problem.
That's a you problem, man.
So it's that dude. Oh goodness.
Niles Morgan, Drew Tranquil, Tavon Coney, Maris Leofold, Jay Nosberry, and Jarrett Grace. What's your ideal combination in a traditional 4-3? And who would be your ideal defensive tackle tandem in front of them from the past 15 years?
Of that group, so what's your ideal 4-3 defense?
Can I just throw this caveat out there before I have heard from several people that played for Notre Dame at the same time
I know what you're going to say.
Grace.
Yep.
They said Jarrett Grace before the injuries was a dude.
Yep.
He was a dude. So
well, you stole my answer.
Just keep that in mind because I thought you might go that direction.
You stole my answer. If I could get a healthy Jarrett Grace pre-injury, he's my Mike. Drew Tranquil's my Will. And Jaden Osbury's my Rover. Because I think he's prime. Now, you could also say I'll put Drew at Rover because he played it. And then put Tavon at Will. I could live with that too. if I can't get pre-injury Jarrett Grace, then I'm putting Tavon at Mike. And him and Niles would rotate there, and then I'd have Drew at will, and I'd have really a 3-man rotation there. Would be my deal inside. My ideal defensive tackle tandem from the past 15 years. So basically, let's say the Brian Kelly tenure. My ideal tackle tandem is pretty easy to go with. I'm going to keep Stephon Tuitt as an end for the purpose of this conversation.
Okay.
It's Lewis Nix at nose tackle and Sheldon Day, 2015 version of Sheldon Day at 3 technique. That is a filthy defensive line, right? Interior defensive line right there.
So you would take that version of Shell over final year Jerry Tillery?
100%.
Jerry Tillery in his last year, though.
I thought Jerry Tillery had half of a good season in 2015 or 2018. I thought Jerry was good early. I thought he disappeared second half of the year.
Okay.
And his numbers back that up. I mean, he had, let's see here, 7.5 tackles for loss through the first 5 games. He had 3 in the last 8 games. Same thing with sacks. He had 7 sacks in the first 5 games. He had 2 against Michigan, 1 against Ball State, 4 against Stanford. He had 1 the rest of the year. So if I could say first half of the season, sure. But the other thing, too, is I like a 3 technique that's disruptive against the run game even more than I like when they can rush the quarterback. And Jerry had 10.5 tackles for loss, but he had like 8 sacks. Most of those were pass game production. Sheldon senior year, Sheldon had 15.5 tackles for loss in 2015, but it only had 4 sacks. I mean, that was all right. And Sean, what I love about watching that team, I would love for you guys, this is a lucky lefty conversation to have. I want to know if I'm right on this. I would love for you guys to get Sheldon on your show and say, hey, man, did you just freelance sometimes? Because there'd be times in games where Sheldon would be doing something different than what everybody else was doing, and he'd just shoot in the backfield and make a play. Because I really felt like, because Sheldon was a really smart football player. I really felt like sometimes Sheldon's like, this is a stupid call. And I'm just going to go make a play. Because like everybody be slanting this way, and Sheldon would just go this way and make a tackle for loss. Like I swear he freelanced and just said, oh, this is a stupid call. I'm going to make a play right here. I could be wrong. I don't know that for a fact, but that's just how I felt watching him play, is that sometimes Sheldon would just kind of say, I'm going to do this and go make a play because this call is stupid. So because it was Van Gorder's second year. So I could be wrong on that, but that's a lucky lefty podcast question for you guys when you get Sheldon on one of these days on your show. So yeah, he would be it.
Other defenders were thinking like Sheldon. Offensive players were thinking like Sheldon. Like,
yeah,
he wasn't alone.
Yeah. I just think Sheldon's one of the ones that had the courage to say, I'm just going to go do this here. Like one of them was against Temple. He had a big stop against Temple. And if you go back and watch that play, you're like, he wasn't doing what everybody else was doing. Like he was doing his own thing. Yeah. But it worked. It worked. And he was awesome that year in 2015. Not having him healthy against Ohio State really hurt them in that game. Because remember, he hurt his foot like they were talking about he might not even play in that game. I think he played, but he was very hobbled. He was clearly not 100%. But, yeah, he was so good that year. And then you give me Big Lou at nose guard, whoever my inside linebackers are, they're going to be running free. They're going to be running free. There's no doubt about that. Got another one from Indy Estimate Trucking, Sean.
Which of these players did you expect to have a better Indy career, and which was the most productive, in your opinion? Cole Luke, Low Wood, Devin Stutstill, Niles Morgan, or Aisha?
I think he meant
Ishaq
Yeah.
Williams. I'm like, Aisha.
Yeah. Are we talking women's basketball here or something like that? Well, the most productive, in my opinion, of that group was probably Cole Luke. Him and Niles were the 2 most productive by far of everybody else. I mean, Niles was a 2-year starter, led the team in tackles 1 year, I believe. Cole Luke had the brilliant 2014 season, and even though he never replicated that year, he still played a ton. So those 2 is where I would be. I'll tell you, the guy that I thought was going to have a much better career is Ishaq. And I still believe that Ishaq would have, had he not got suspended, was on the verge of really breaking out in his last year. I really think that. And because I would have really liked to have seen what he could have done in 2014. And then there was talk that he might be allowed back in 2015. And I think he would have been really good then. But he was a guy that I thought was going to be a lot better than he was. I liked Devin Studstill too, and he was pretty good as a freshman. He just didn't want to do the work to continue to be good. And that's what kind of hurt him is, some look. And Sean, it kind of goes to what you talked about earlier is there are certain things you just can't see on film. And you really can't know until you really watch a kid play. But, Devin Studstill to be the player he was as a freshman and then just really not do a whole lot else after that, there's just certain things that you just can't see and you can't evaluate when you're watching film. So here's an interesting question from an Ohio State fan, Sean.
Well, what's the loudest you've ever heard Notre Dame Stadium be, both for a whole game and for an individual moment?
So I have talked to people like Tim O'Malley and Lou Samoji, Tim Priester. They've all said over the years that the Miami game in '88 and the Michigan game in '88 were the two loudest environments that Notre Dame is. And that was back when they had a 59,000 seat stadium. For me, the two loudest games that I remember were both in they were both in 2015 actually, and that was Texas. The opener was rocking, and part of the reason was they had just started construction. And the way that things were, it was one of those years where it would funnel actually the noise back in instead of it escaping out. So it kind of amped it up, not intentionally, but amped it up a little bit. And then that USC game was pretty loud too. Clemson this year was in that conversation. Clemson this year was really loud and wild. It was, just from the moment that block kick happened. Even before that, though, but like when Cam Hart was making big plays and Benjamin Morrison was making stops, they just were outfit. Even though, like we talk about the Clemson or the Notre Dame offense and how physical they were, the Notre Dame defense came out and they were physical that game. Your corners were making big hits. Remember when the tight end tried to run over Benjamin Morrison and he just took it and took him down? It was like, hey, you can run me over. You're 240 pounds, but you're going down and we're getting the ball back.
Yeah, I love Marcus Freeman's comment to Benjamin Morrison when he came to the sidelines, like, "Hey, you need to get low, bro. Just get low."
But he took it, right? He was like, "I'm coming at you."
Yeah.
Cam Hart was great in the first quarter of that game. He was coming up, blowing up runs, forcing them to hold him. And then once the block kick happened, it was just like I remember when Drew Pine scored that little quarterback keep.
Mm-hmm.
You could feel the stadium rocking, and you can't often feel that at Notre Dame Stadium in the press box. You really can. It's not one of those older stadiums where like the press box vibrates whenever the crowd gets excited. It's not like that. You can feel it. That was in the conversation with those two 2015 games for me. Michigan 2018 was pretty loud in the first half. It just didn't stay that way for the whole game. Like when Brandon hit Fink on that bomb, that place was insane. So we're talking about for an individual moment.
Yeah. When
he threw that post route and Chris Fink outplayed those two Michigan defenders, that Notre Dame Stadium went crazy. It went nuts. Will Fuller's touchdown against Adoree Jackson was about as loud as a moment as I've ever seen. And it was one of those crescendo moments, Sean, because it was quiet in the stadium. You had just watched Cody Kessler go right down the field and score a touchdown.
Yeah,
You had and if you remember in 2015, that was coming off the year that USC had just obliterated Notre Dame at the end of the year. You're like, oh, here we go again. They're going to murder us just like they did last year. And because that was a game they won 49-14, and that was with Sarkisian calling off the dogs at the end of the game. They could have hung a 70 spot on Notre Dame in that game if they wanted to.
Easy.
They really could have. And so you come out, they go right down the field. And they do a motion, and you see at the snap, you see Fuller go run his post right. It's real quiet. And when Deshaun throws it deep, right? So you see Deshaun, and you just hear this like slow crescendo of like, because then as soon as Deshaun throws it, they all see freaking Fuller just smoke Adoree off the line. Yeah. And so you hear this crescendo, and the moment that Will Fuller caught it, that place went nuts. Absolutely nuts. So that was another very loud moment. I was actually fortunate enough to be outside for that moment because I was up top this is in the old press box. They used to let me video the games back then so I could watch them, like do my breakdowns, which they stopped doing. But my wife was Angela was the one doing the video. So I was actually up there checking on her to make sure because there was some issue with it. And so I was actually outside for that one. The stadium was vibrating when he caught that ball. It was pretty awesome. So those are some of my individual moments. Sean, how about you? I know you've been to a few games over the years. What are some that stand out for you?
It got pretty loud at Soldier Field in 2012 when they beat Miami. It was a pretty loud environment. I would say I was there for 2012. What's it? Not that Stanford game. Which Stanford game was I there for? Not 12.
Was it at Stanford or home game?
No, it was a home game.
Was it the 14 game where Ev threw the touchdown at the end of the game?
Yeah, it was the 14 game. The game was pretty, but most of my games have been via. I can tell you the loudest I ever thought coming through the television, like what it felt like. Yo, that is insane. That 2012 Stanford game seemed like an electric atmosphere, especially for the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like the crowd was into it. It was raining. That seemed like something that would have been very loud. I agree with everyone that said 88, Michigan and Miami. The Miami game you felt the energy coming through the TV. It was like, yo, this is incredible. Because you didn't know what you were going to get, right? Because you didn't know Notre Dame was going to come out and physically just impose their will. Again, this is Miami, man. So to see that and energy that was built, of course, the T-shirt and everything that was surrounding that. But I remember the 93 Florida State game. That had to be one of the loudest moments because I'm sitting there in my college dorm watching this with some friends of mine that were Florida State fans, and I am talking trash the entire time. And I'm talking trash. You know how you talk trash, but you have a fondness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really liked If Charlie Ward was playing,
yes.
I was watching him play.
Yes.
I love Charlie Ward.
Kes McCorvey. Yeah, that was a fun. Derek Brooks was a great line. That was a fun team to watch, except that weekend.
Except that weekend. And
I liked Bobby Bowden. I had a lot of respect for Bobby Bowden, too.
Yeah.
Because Florida State was one of those teams that would go play anybody, anywhere, any place, anytime. You know, I mean, they weren't afraid to play people like Steve Spurrier was. I mean, like Florida did. So, yes.
Yeah. Look, let me tell you something. The stadium.
Can I say something? Charlie Ward was ahead of his time.
Oh, absolutely.
Like way ahead of his time.
Absolutely.
Like Charlie Ward is like what today's quarterbacks are.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was Bryce Young / those type of guys way before those guys were even born. You know, like he was a quarterback from a different era playing in an era where I don't think like his numbers would have been so much better in a modern offense, and they're pretty good then. But yeah,
I don't know if you've seen his documentary. He has a documentary out.
I didn't see that. No.
Where he talks about his evaluation coming back from the NFL, and his evaluation is pretty much what made him choose basketball.
Yeah,
he wanted to play in the NFL. He would have been a first round pick right now.
Today, yes.
Oh, the type of quarterback he was, absolutely.
Dude, if Christian Ponder's a first-round pick, Charlie Ward's number one overall pick. Yes. Because back then it was so much they were looking for a prototype.
6'3", 220
big
pounds.
arm, sit in the pocket. Yeah, exactly. Because like the only guys that were doing things in the NFL, running the ball like Charlie were like Steve Young was an anomaly. But at that time, I think Steve had just kind of taken over the Niners.
Yeah.
They hadn't won the Super Bowl yet.
Nope.
It was like Randall Cunningham and John Elway, and they were unicorns, but teams weren't looking for that. I mean, you didn't watch John Elway say, hey, we need to find the next John Elway because you knew like there isn't one. You know what I mean? You were trying to find the next Dan Marino, the next Phil Simms, the next, 6'4", 6'5", 6'3", as you said, big arm, pocket, 7-step drop quarterback. That Jim, because there was a lot of run and shoots back then, so you want guys quick, get rid of the ball quickly, and Charlie was throwing the ball down the field and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it would be viewed much differently in today's NFL, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Could you imagine what his numbers would have been like? Like, because he would have gone like, let's just say, probably played for like a Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley in today's era. His numbers would be ridiculous,
insane.
Couldn't beat Notre Dame though. All right, we got a two-parter here from one of our OGs, Notre Dame 2164.
So I'm watching a few Notre Dame games from last year, and it seems to me that we were much better at run blocking on the O-line than pass blocking. Am I seeing it that way because the run blocking is that good, or do we have a problem pass blocking? What do the stats suggest?
Well, I don't know. I think I'm trying to think how to say this correctly.
I think the run blocking got better as the season went on.
I think the pass blocking was a mess early because there's always a lot of different reasons why the pass game isn't working, right? Protection-wise. And it's not always because your offensive line is not protecting. I think there was communication problems early. Like Ohio State just ran two different inside delay blitzes that Notre Dame just wasn't prepared for and didn't know how to react to. So obviously that was a problem. I mean, that was something, but those weren't things that really hurt them later in the year, for example. I think that when you look at Notre Dame's pass pro last year, I think they ranked like 40th in the nation in sacks allowed. There wasn't a whole lot of difference between them and the top 30 teams. It's 2-3 sacks. A lot of those happened early when they were still figuring some things out. I also think there were things that happened where the offensive line the checks weren't good. The protection checks from the quarterback weren't correct. I think Marcus Freeman has talked about this a little bit last year where, the quarterback's got to set certain things and have an idea. And then a lot of other times there were sacks that happened last year. I can think of 3 or 4 off the top of my head where it's like, that's the quarterback's dude, right? I mean, like, what your protection is. We're running a mic protection and we're going to the mic here. The running back is here to here. If they bring off somebody off the edge here, quarterback, that's on you. You got to have the answer for that. We don't have an account for that guy. Now, it may not be a thing where they're brought more guys that we can block. That's not always what a blitz is, where you just overall bring more guys than we have. But that we're going to slide our protection here, so you bring an extra guy off of here. And because teams get tendencies for pass protection as well. And it's your job to say, hey, look, you can't always be a team where if the back is whatever direction the back is, it tells us where the protection is going. You can't be that way. You've got to be able to mix it up. But sometimes teams get it right and they take a guess and they say, hey, we think there's a greater tendency that when the back is here in a 3-by-1, that they're running the slide here, or they're running a mic protection there, or whatever the case may be. If there's no tight end, they're going to run the slide. If there is a tight end, they may run a mic protection, whatever the case may be. And so then you bring pressures off of where that they don't have the numbers to account for it. Well, it's up to the quarterback to know who we can't block. And then when that guy comes, you've got to get the ball out somewhere. And there were times where that didn't happen either. So I didn't think either group was very good early. I will say that I think the run game got going sooner than the pass game, but I think the pass protection aspect of it got better as the season went on and was good. I think some of the issues that happened later in the year when it comes to some protection breakdowns were more about the quarterbacks than they were about.
And I think, like you said, second half of Navy's perfect example.
Right.
Like Navy just made the decision, we're going to bring more than they have.
Yep.
And we don't think the quarterback can see it pre-snap and figure it out and know where to go. That's what it is. We don't think he can do it. And they were right.
Mm-hmm.
They were right. And people were wondering like, oh, why didn't the left tackle do this? Or why didn't the right tackle do this? Man, they're blitzing 7.
Well, that's not his job. He can't do that because if he does that, then they run and that's part of good scheme from a defense. Correct. Yeah. That's not his guy. That's not his gap.
In today's modern football, if you blitz one more than they have, then guess what? More than likely you have an athletic quarterback that can make a play, extend the play, and then get something out of it. Yeah. It happens every Saturday, all the time. So You're right.
Yep. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't plays like there was Blake Fisher had some inconsistency in pass pro. Mm-hmm. I thought the guards had a little bit of inconsistency in pass pro, but a lot of times it was due to just like you have. I thought the running backs were a little inconsistent early, but they were better late in the year. A lot of times, I think some of the issues were more quarterback related than they were.
Like Blake Fisher had a bad game against Stanford. He just had a bad game.
Yeah,
it just wasn't his best game, and he had a good season. That Stanford game was just not his best show.
Definitely not. Definitely not his day. And that's going to be a key for him. I'm going to have an article coming out on him probably tomorrow. I'm going through these player profiles and such, and hit that one for him will be about just the consistency.
Yeah.
That's going to be the key for him.
Brendan Plenser, why do you think the lack of patience in recruiting from the BK era has transferred over to Marcus Freeman's tenure? Is it something to do with Notre Dame as an institution or strategy?
I don't agree with the premise, to be completely honest with you. Brandon, I think your biggest problem with Notre Dame right now is not that. It's not a lack of patience. It's just you have different – I'm not going to say wrong because you could be right. You and Notre Dame have very different evaluations of certain players. I think you're going to look at Teddy Rizak and Bodie Cahoon and say they didn't have patience. And now I know I've had these conversations with people that would be in the know. It's not about that. Teddy Rizak was not a guy they took because they got nervous. They took him because when they were able to see workouts and I mean, you're talking about a kid that they were able to get verified 4.52 time on, that visited campus and measured in at 6'3.5" with 33-inch arms and ran a 4.52 and tests out extremely well. And they say, this kid's got an incredibly high ceiling. We want to get on him before anybody else does. That's not about a lack of patience. That's about an evaluation that you happen to disagree with, which is fine. I'm not saying who's right or wrong. I'm just saying Bodie Cahoon is not a kid that they took because they lacked patience to wait for Kingston or Chris Cole. They love Bodie Cahoon. Again, another kid with a verified 4.5 40 time that's still learning the game of football. They're betting on the ceiling in a year where I don't think that they really love the linebacker class, which I don't either. I just think it's more of an evaluation difference of opinion. Cole Mullins is another example. You're not that high on Cole Mullins. Totally fine. I think Cole Mullins is a dude, and I think he's got a ton of upside, and Notre Dame loves that kid. So we may say, hey, well, why not wait for Malachi Williams? Well, why do you assume that they like him more than Cole Mullins? I don't think that they do. I don't think that they necessarily view certain guys as better that you might think are better, which is, again, Brandon, I'm not coming down on you. So I don't think it's a lack of patience, Brandon. I just think that they're making evaluations that you don't agree with. And we'll find out soon. And Brandon, I do know this enough about you. I know that you would love to be wrong about the ones that you're concerned about. And I feel that way with certain, like Sean Sevillano as a kid. I don't get excited about him as others do. I hope they're right. I hope I'm wrong. I do. There's certain kids that they've taken this year. I've said this. I'm not as high on Carson Hobbs as Mike Mickens is. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's earned it. He's shown that he knows cornerback evaluation more than I do in his track record. So, and I hope he's right because I love Carson Hobbs as a kid. I mean, he's awesome. I'll say that. I think that, but it's not to me, Sean, it's not a lack of patience. It's a difference of opinion and evaluation. Like the Anthony Knapp one, that again, not a lack of patience, just a difference of opinion and evaluation. That's one of those ones where you talk about a coach pounding on the table for a kid. That was Joe Rudolph pounding on the table for Anthony Knapp. Now, he could be right. He could be wrong. We don't know. But it wasn't a patience thing. Aeneas Williams was not a patience thing. That kid came to their camp and dominated. And then the film is incredible. I mean, again, you could talk about level of football, but the film was good. But then he comes to Irish Invasion last year and is outstanding. Receiver, Isaiah Canyon was not a lack of patience. They see a dude with 5-star upside. So do I. They loved Micah Gilbert from the beginning. Not a lack of patience. They just love that kid. So I think the difference here, Brandon, for you is I don't think it's a patience problem. It's just an evaluation problem. If what you say is correct, if what Brandon you think about players is accurate, then the issue will be more about this staff is not good at evaluating players. It won't be so much that they're impatient like Brian Kelly's tenure was, because we've seen that. And if they were impatient, they would have already filled Justin Scott's spot, or they wouldn't have pushed Owen Wafel out and would have made him the 3 technique and then, given up on Justin Scott. Or, there's there's guys in this class now, Sean, they would have given up on Micah Gilbert way earlier than this staff did and taken somebody else.
Yeah.
So that's the thing is for me is I don't think they lack patience. I think that there's just some evaluation differences of opinion with the staff compared to what you think, which is, again, please don't take that, Brandon, as me saying you're wrong. You could end up being right, but there's just some difference of opinion from an evaluation standpoint on that one.
Siggy 13, Notre Dame's membership into the AAU is a big deal in my opinion. They jump schools like NC State, Virginia Tech, who do more research with Fed dollars. Do you think this foretells Notre Dame's move to the Big Ten or just an academic move?
I think this is an academic move. Look, here's why I don't think it's a Big Ten thing. Everybody keeps saying, well, this is, a lot of the Big Ten teams are in there. And that's been one of the issues with Notre Dame in the past is those are different type of institutions than Notre Dame, far more research oriented. I mean, Michigan State is basically like an agricultural school, more so than like a liberal arts school. I mean, there's an aspect to it, but it's a big agricultural school. Virginia Tech is a little different that way. This is an academic thing. Here's the deal. If Notre Dame wanted to be in the Big Ten before early 90s, like a year ago, like, guys, when they started expansion and they went and got USC and UCLA, does anyone here think that if Notre Dame would have said, hey, yeah, we want to come, that they would have said, no, you have to become an AAU member first? No, they wouldn't have. That's about football. And so you may say, well, hey, Notre Dame is now in the AAU, so they may be more willing to join the Big Ten. I don't think that's the case either. I don't think those two things have anything to do with each other, in my opinion. Now, does that mean Notre Dame's never going to join the Big Ten? Not saying that either. I'm just saying I think this is completely independent of that. That's my opinion on it. And, I just don't see how that's going to have any impact on conference decisions for Notre Dame. It's not sports related at all. This AAU thing is not at all related to athletics. It's purely an academic research type of situation. So, we already had that one, right?
Yeah.
About Beasley. We already had that one. So let's move on here real quick. Here's one from John A1. Here, let's go to this one.
Now that Notre Dame has added a transfer running back, who in the running back room best complements Audric Estime?
A healthy Jadarian Price is without question the best complement to Audric. And I would argue just on skill set alone that the next guy on the board is Jeremiah Love. Those two guys are much better complements. And now I think all four of the backup running backs are actually complementary to Audric. I think Audric has a different skill set than the rest of the running backs. But I would rank Jadarian as the top of that list. And then Jeremiah a very close second. And that's partly because Jeremiah just is still a freshman. We have to see him play. That's the thing. We got another one here from John A1. Sean.
As far as health goes, the three most important players, in my opinion, are Sam Hartman, Joe Alt, and Blake Fisher in that order. Does IB agree or disagree?
I agree with the first two. I feel like number three, boy, that's a good one, Sean. Let me see. The guy we're just talking about, I'd say Audric right now. I'd put 3 ahead of Blake Fisher. I feel with Tosh Baker, with Emil Wagner, with guys like that, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with those guys being the every down back or every down right tackle than I would necessarily Jabron Payne right now being the guy, Jadarian Price. And it's not about talent. It's just about health. I mean, is Jadarian ready to go from not playing at all as a freshman, recovering from an Achilles injury, to being the guy that touches the ball 15, 18 times a game? No, he's not going to be ready for that right now. Jabron Payne hasn't really played a full football game, a healthy football game, since his sophomore year, which is what now, 3 seasons he's played. So it's just about the unknown of their health. And then Jeremiah Love's a freshman. So I would actually put Audric Estime there ahead of Blake Fisher, just because I feel like there's some more experience and healthier options to replace Blake at right tackle than there are at running back this season.
I would put Benjamin Morrison at 3.
Yeah, I get that. I think as far as talent-wise, I'd get that. My only thing there is I like the depth there.
Yeah, but the depth doesn't mean that they're him.
Yeah. No,
See,
they're not.
That's
What I'm saying is it's kind of like this, Sean. Let me ask you this question. Now, you and I agree that Sam Hartman's a much better player than Cade McNamara, correct?
You just made me laugh. Go ahead.
Right?
Yes, we agree on that.
Significantly so.
Yes.
I would argue, however, that Cade McNamara is a bigger improvement for Iowa than Sam Hartman is for Notre Dame relative to who was there before. Right?
Yeah.
Same thing at corner. So Benjamin Morrison is better than Audric Estime, better than Blake Fisher. But I would say I don't think the drop-off from him to the next guy would be as big as the drop-off from Audric to those other guys simply because of the lack of what we know about health. Now, I'll say this. If I knew that Jadarian Price was fully healthy and ready to go, Audric's not even in the conversation because I'm like, dude, they're going to be fine, right? Especially now Devin Ford. If it's Audric goes down and you got a healthy Jadarian, a healthy Jabron Payne, healthy Devin Ford, and Jeremiah Love, you're going to be fine. It's the health part for me. But that's where I'm coming from. But, yeah, you're correct. There is – and I think you throw Cam Hart in there too, Sean. Is either one of those corners. There's a big – I mean, those guys are dudes.
Yeah.
And there's unknowns. Those other guys, we don't know what those other guys are going to be. But it's not a health thing. All right, let's get to some more here real quick. Let's see here. All right, we got Noop Life 007 with a question.
Brian and Sean, who was the biggest underachiever and overachiever you ranked coming out of high school? Guys you didn't think would contribute much to become a star.
For me, the biggest underachiever for me was Josh Barajas. I mean, I get asked this all the time. I don't know why people obsess about this question, but they ask, what's the biggest recruiting miss you ever had? And I'm like, it's Josh Barajas, and it's not even close. I mean, now he would not be a 5-star on my current system. He'd be a 4.5-star in my current grading system, but still, I thought he was a dude, and he was awful. I mean, when I watched him his first freshman year, I mean, you kind of knew right away. Like his body type changed. Some of the things I'd heard about what he kind of did in preparation for the season, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, that kid was a guy that they flipped from Penn State, Sean. It's not like this is a kid that you beat Indiana and out for that nobody else wanted and you took a flyer on. And I mean, this is an Army All-American. This is a kid that, you flipped Penn State for, that some big-time programs are coming after. And he was really in high school. And then you watch him as a freshman in high school and or in college, and you're like, who the heck is that guy? I don't know who that is. That's not Josh Barajas. And then he goes to a 1AA school and does nothing. Like, there's something more there than the talent there. So that was without question the biggest underachiever. The biggest overachiever to me is recently, and that's Kyron Williams for me. I had Kyron Williams near the bottom of my recruiting list. I mean, I thought he was a very good high school back, good dual threat player. I thought he was going to play. I think he was going to be a good rotation guy. Even as a freshman, I was like, when they were having a running back injury, I was like, play Kyron. Kyron's a nice compliment to Tony Jones in 2019. Never thought he was going to be a back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher, ever. No way. He was a way better player, and he was a way better player early. Like, if you'd have told me by his 5th year he's going to break out and have the kind of season he had as a sophomore, I'm like, yeah, okay, mate, yeah, I can see that. He'll play behind a pretty good offensive line and all that. But he did that as a redshirt freshman. And so Kyron was way better than I thought he was going to be. So whether you want to call that a misevaluation, which it was, or him overachieving, he was a lot better than I thought he was going to be. And I didn't dislike him, Sean. I thought he was going to be a nice, good rotation player. That's it. And he was the guy. I mean, early on. He was a big part of that offense in 2020. Big part of that offense.
Most people might laugh, but I think Joe Alt was an overachiever, in my opinion. Because I thought he had a chance, because of his bloodline, I thought he had a chance to be good. But the fact he had to play really early and turned out to be as good as he was early, that I didn't see.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
So, and that's with him. I think you had him at about a 4.5?
As an upside grade.
Ceiling, upside?
Mm-hmm.
And he has definitely eclipsed that.
Oh, gosh, yes. And he did that early.
Early. So.
And I was high on him. I mean, to your point, I was high on him. I had him a 4.5. It's a 4.5 stars, the upside of a top 50 national player. Like, that's really good. But he became a 5-star as a true sophomore. I mean, and it was even clear as a freshman, Sean, that he had more upside than
Yes, it was.
than I thought he would. I mean,
yes, it was.
Yeah, it was because he just moved. So, I mean, because first of all, I thought he'd need a couple years to get big enough. And then he comes out as a true freshman. He's over 300 pounds, and you're like, this guy's really athletic still.
Man,
it's like, okay, this guy's going to be really good. And then it took maybe 2-3 games to be like, yeah, his ceiling's higher than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And I'm, again, someone who thought he had a very high ceiling. So it's, yeah. Some of the other guys that I missed on are guys, or not to say missed on, but underachieved. I think a lot of it had to do with injuries. Like Tommy Kramer, I think would have been a much better player without all the injuries. Josh Lugg would have been a much better player without all the injuries.
Yeah.
Javon McKinley would have been a better player without all the early injuries in his career. So there's some guys like that too that didn't quite live up to speed, but I think it had more to do with things that are maybe outside of their control a little bit more than anything else. All right, here's one from let's go Siggy 13.
Did we do? Oh no, this is a different type of question.
Different type of it, yeah.
All right, SEC is keeping 8 conference games instead of bumping to 9. Do you think the playoff committee would ever factor in a non-SEC 2-loss team over a 1-loss SEC team due to the cupcake game handicap?
No, I think they should, but I don't think that they will. I think because Sean, and I'm curious what your thoughts on this, but to me, the everyone's convinced themselves that the SEC is just way here and everybody else is just way down here, and I just don't necessarily agree with that, especially when you're talking about the top teams. Now, I think the SEC still, for the most part to this day, is the much deeper conference. Right? I get all that. But it's not as deep as it gets made out to be, in my opinion. But at the same time, like I said, but you don't always play those teams. And I would say, especially if you're coming from, and it's not going to be the East and the West then, because they're going to go to some different level. Are they getting rid of divisions altogether or something like that? So it's going to make it even harder to look at it. But I think that people in the committee and ESPN have convinced themselves that just by the nature of playing X amount of SEC schools, nobody else has to play 8 SEC schools, It's like, okay, whatever. So I don't think that they will. I think that they should. I think, look, if you're a 2-loss SEC team, ever factor in if you're a 2-loss non-SEC team, I don't think you have a snowball's chance in heck of getting in over a 1-loss SEC team, unless that 2-loss team is a blue blood and the 1-loss SEC team is Mississippi State, Kentucky, Missouri, something like that. Because they're not going to get the same benefit of the doubt that LSU and Georgia and Alabama are. So that's the other part of it too, Sean, is who is the 1-loss SEC team we're talking about? If it's a 2-loss Baylor team that just played a juggernaut of a schedule and had some big wins over Alabama with 1 loss, it's a no-brainer. If it's Arkansas with 1 loss, Mississippi State with 1 loss, and it's Oklahoma. Well, actually, Oklahoma's a bad example now. USC and the Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan, Clemson, Florida State. That team might get more of the benefit of the doubt over a Missouri, a Kentucky, a Vanderbilt, a Mississippi State. But if it's Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, and they're a 1-loss SEC team with a crap schedule outside of that 1 loss, like it'd be like an SEC team having like Notre Dame's 2021 schedule, where you literally played one good team all year and they beat you, right? There's some teams that have had 2 losses that should have got in over that Notre Dame team, if we come down to it. Now, that year, there weren't any other teams that could – it was just a down year, which we thought it would be before the year. But I just think the SEC is going to get the benefit of the doubt in those situations, Sean's, unless the depends are. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it depends on the situation. Traditionally, no. I would say no. But, you can have one situation that sticks out to where that needs to be a conversation, and you really need to interpret what you're looking at with those 2 teams. I think one of the bigger questions, I think there was a question this year. with Alabama. And people ask the question, is Alabama a better team than TCU?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a question of whether or not TCU had the better resume.
Right.
Is Alabama a better team than TCU? Let's have an honest discussion about that.
Right.
And, the resume won out. So I can definitely see a discussion being had in certain situations. And, it's always resume versus team.
Mm-hmm.
Resume versus team. And I think in a vacuum, if you ask me, is Alabama better than TCU? Yes, I'm going to tell you yes.
Sure.
Yes. But you can't devalue the regular season.
Right.
You can't devalue what teams do. At that point, then what do we sit down and tell these young men?
Right.
That
What's
are
the point of playing?
confident? What's the point of playing?
Right. Well, and also because I don't know that I would say last year's Alabama team was better than last year's TCU team if they played in the regular season. Because what do we have to go on? We have to go on who they played. Well, Alabama lost to really the only two good teams they played all year. I mean, they didn't have to play Georgia. They played Tennessee and lost, and they played LSU and lost. I know they were close games, but you literally lost to every good team you played. Your only other win over a ranked opponent was what? Texas? You beat Utah State, Louisiana Monroe, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Mississippi State. Oh, Mississippi State. I'm sorry. Yeah, that big, huge win over Mississippi State. Oh, wonderful. That's great. You should be in the playoff. But you have a common opponent. That's the thing is, too. You had a common opponent. Alabama got outplayed by Texas. If Texas doesn't lose their starting quarterback, game's probably not all that close. Right? Well, TCU played Texas as well, went on the road and outplayed them, thoroughly outplayed them, beat them 17-10, but that's only because Texas recovered a fumble and ran it for a touchdown late in the game. It was not a competitive game. So if you look at like the game control and all the metrics that factor into that, Texas against the same common opponent on the same exact field, TCU was the better team. So if you're going to look at resume, to your point, Sean, I don't know that last year's Bama team is better than last year's TCU team because we never saw them play. Well, look what they did to Georgia. But Bama didn't play Georgia last year, so we don't know what Bama would have done against Georgia, right? And so I think you make a great point. You're going to have those situations, but resume has to matter. Mm-hmm. Remember when they were trying to do this in 2018? They were trying to say that an undefeated or the 2-loss Georgia team deserved to get in. No, you don't. Well, look how close they played Bama, but they lost. They had their chance to get into the playoff, and they lost. And they got smacked by LSU by 20 points. Yeah, but if they were to play Notre Dame or if they were to play Oklahoma, would they win? It's not the point. Because otherwise, just give Bama and Georgia a spot. Hey, you guys got your automatic berths every year. Because if Georgia last season, let's just say for some reason last year, Sean, that Georgia would have gone out last year and lost to Kentucky or lost to Missouri in a game that they struggled and lost to Tennessee. They didn't play that well against Kentucky and would have lost to Kentucky and been a 3-loss team. They still could have beat Ohio State and TCU. So does that mean they should still get in because they have better players and in an individual game could beat Ohio State, could beat TCU, could beat Michigan? That's not how it should be. And I think that's such a well, who's the best team? What defines a best team? The team that wins. Isn't that what makes you a good team? Not the most talented team. Well, they're going to have X number of draft picks. Don't care. Has nothing to do with it. So I get kind of annoyed by that thing where, well, this team's better. Based on what? Because this year's version of that team is not better. And we heard this crap when Notre Dame in 2018 as well, when Notre Dame beat Michigan in head-to-head. But going into that Ohio State game, you literally had people like Kirk Herbstreit and others saying that if Michigan beat Ohio State, they actually had an argument to get in over Notre Dame. Based on what? The Big Ten, they beat so-and-so, but they literally got outplayed thoroughly by Notre Dame. Never led. The only time it was tied is when it was 0-0. I mean, but that's kind of because it's the reputation of who you play and who you are and all that kind of stuff. Like if Georgia goes 11-1 against that schedule this year, they're getting in. They're getting in, right? But do we really know that they're as good as they were the last 2 years? No, we don't, because they're not going to be challenged. Where let's say they don't have to play the best what we would perceive to be the most talented SEC team because they got beat up in this juggernaut because I think the SEC West this year is loaded. I mean, I think Arkansas, especially with KJ Jefferson, is healthy. I think LSU is going to even be better this year than they were last year. I think Ole Miss is going to be a pretty good football team this year. I think Texas A&M is going to be better if Jimbo will let Bobby Petrino run that offense the way he wants to run that offense. They're going to be better. I think the West is going to be really good this year. I could see a couple 2-loss West teams being better than just about anybody in the East outside of outside of Georgia. But Georgia doesn't have to play any of those teams. And so that's why it's like, well, you didn't get the best because this team kind of had the rougher. They had 3 of their 4 toughest games were on the road. You got the team in the SEC West that happened to have a little bit of an easier slate, because Alabama has to play all those West teams, but then they also have to play Tennessee. So it's like they could lose twice and still be a better quote unquote. I mean, a team where if they play Georgia, they'd beat Georgia, but Georgia's still getting in because they only had 1 loss and they didn't have to play Bama. So, the whole thing just sucks to me. I really think it sucks. I can't stand it. But nobody really in the media I've seen challenge it yet because it's the SEC. They already got to play a tough enough schedule. I've actually seen a couple people actually speak out against it, to be honest with you, now that I think about it. Yeah, I've seen a couple people say, like, you're going to have 16 teams in the league and you're not even going to play half the teams in your league because that's what's happening now. If you play 8 games and if you're playing 8 of the 16 – you're playing 8 games in the 16 conference league, you're not playing half the teams, right?
No, that is half.
You're playing half the teams,
right? Because you can only play 15 of the teams because you're one of the teams,
right? That's what it's
a little bit over half, a little bit over half.
That's it. You're playing half, right? And so, whereas like the Big 12 for the last few years, you literally had to play everybody, and you had to beat somebody twice to win the Big 12. You had to beat every team in your league and somebody else twice, or at least played somebody twice. So yeah, I get sick of the SEC, man. I really do. I can
tell. It's evident. It's quite evident.
I hate. It's like, it's all because everything they do now is just money, 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 money. And because it's like the whole thing with college football right now, man. That just drives me nuts. Because you've got the NCAA and their corruptness on one side. And then you got these NIL agents trying to pretend like they're the arbiters of goodness.
Right.
Like, no, you're just trying to win on this side for your thing. You don't care about the game. Why? It feels like there's just nobody in it now that cares about the game anymore.
Right. Yeah.
It's all about this group needs to get paid and that group needs to get paid and this TV contract and that TV contract. And it's like, does nobody care about the game anymore? And the answer is no, because ESPN doesn't care about the game. They care about making money. Commissioners don't care about the game. They care about making money. Because here's the thing. You could do all these things for the integrity of the game, but if you're not making money for your teams, guess what they're going to do? You're out. But hey, I made the game better. Don't care. You didn't hook our pocketbooks up. That's what they care about. There's nobody looking out for the game. And we've gone from one extreme to another, in my opinion. And so I just laugh when I see all these NIL agents trying to act like they're just the fighters for fairness, in this whole battle. Yeah, I'm sure your commission that you're getting for these kids is, you don't want to cap on it. And I don't think there should be caps on NIL. I think that's a horrible proposal by the NCAA. There should not be caps on how much you can make in NIL. That's not free market at all. And if NIL is about name, image, and likeness, this isn't a salary or a stipend you're giving every player. This is, I'm the star quarterback at Notre Dame. I'm worth this because this company's willing to pay me that. And the starting quarterback at, Indiana State is not worth that because he's not the quarterback at Notre Dame. There shouldn't be a cap on how much I can make because I'm the quarterback at so-and-so. That's, to me, against what NIL is supposed to be about. If we're going to talk about like salaries and stuff, sure. I mean, we can talk about that. If we want to talk about what I think collective should be giving everybody, I think collective should be giving everybody. Like I would set a rule if I was football king for a day. I'd set a rule that collectives are a good thing. I think I like collectives, but there should be basically you have to pay every player the same, and there's caps on what teams can pay for the collective part. So everybody's getting paid. You're giving in to support the team, and everybody that's part of your team is going to make a minimum, $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, whatever the case may be. And then you can also get NIL deals as part of other things. So I can go, be a social media influencer or something like that. And they're willing to pay me for that. I can, go on a local car dealership wants to have me as one of their spokesmen and an influencer. So they're going to pay me X amount of dollars because I'm the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. Then that's fine. And my value should be set by what those companies are willing to pay me to go to. That's what the free market's supposed to be about. And so that shouldn't have caps. Collectives, I'm okay putting caps on. But let's be real. These NIL agents aren't upset about caps because they think it's unfair. They don't like caps because it's putting a cap on their commission. That's why they don't like caps. It's not because I just have a heart for helping young people. Okay, then don't take a commission. Do it pro bono. Right? No, that's not what it's about. And I'm not against them making money, but just stop pretending that you're the arbiters of fairness and integrity. Just say what it's about. We're trying to make the most for our clients because that's how we make the most money. Just be honest about it. It's like, A-Rod, I didn't leave the Mariners to go to the Rangers because of money. It's because I want to win. Dude, you left the best team in the American League for the worst team in the American League. Just say it's about the money. No one's going to have a problem with that. Dude, do you know what why did you go to the Rangers? They offered me $400 million. And the Mariners offered me $250 million.
And
so
you know
that's
what?
why. And
I will say this. I will say this. There is opportunity for industry, business, and expansion. And getting in on the ground floor, these NIL agents know that. And anything from a legislation standpoint that can cap it or, hinder the expansion of the industry. Hey, they just held one of their biggest conferences. Brandon Wimbush was talking to us about it about a month ago down in Texas. So they're looking at where this thing can go in 10 years. So look at it almost as they look at it as insurance agencies. Look at us. How can we take the service that we provide for you and allow it to not only give us revenue, but then how can we take that revenue and grow it? They're trying to build a business. I mean, now that's the honesty you would like. We're trying to build a business here. Okay.
Got no problem with that.
Fine. You see the opportunity? Build the business. But in doing so, understand that that business cannot get so out of control that it impacts the game at the end of the day. And that's the fairness you would love to see from both sides of this, or all sides of this.
And again, I'm okay with the NIL agents and lawyers pushing back on NCAA proposals because we all know the NCAA is going to do whatever's best for the schools. They don't care about the players. We know this. There needs to be a pushback. What I get tired of is the pushback that's this self-righteous pushback about fairness. No, it's not about fairness. You don't care about fairness because if you could have it your way, you would make it go completely on the opposite end because the opposite end is how you make the most money. Let's be honest. It's about fairness. Yeah. You're not looking to be fair to colleges. You're looking to maximize the best you can do for your client, which is your job. That's literally your job. I'm okay with that. But just stop pretending like you're these arbiters of truth and justice and fairness and equality and all this other nonsense because you're not. You don't care about that. Right. And so if college football was making nothing, these people wouldn't care about what's best for the players because there'd be no money in it. And so I get tired of that whole thing. But it goes back to the whole point of nobody's looking out for the game anymore, Sean. Nobody's looking out for the game. Not coaches, not players. And I don't expect the players to because what do they know? Yeah, like they don't know. Right. But it's like Major League Baseball used to be this way. There was a time, Sean, when there's no way you and I could have been convinced that Major League Baseball is not going to be the number one sport in America. There was a time where there's no way you'd have been able to convince me of that.
Yeah.
Now, is it even in top 4 right now? I mean, top 3 right now? I mean, it's definitely not. I mean, I'm talking like college football, college or NFL, NBA. Is the NBA head of Major League Baseball now? I mean, but it's why? It's all because of things that they have done, choices they have made because there was too many people that were worried about the money and not worried about the game. Like my dad, Sean, was a huge baseball fan my whole life. We would drive down to Reds games. He played baseball, played softball. He loved baseball. I don't know that he's watched a game on television since 1994 because when they canceled the World Series over money, I'm done.
Yeah.
And he's never come back.
Yeah.
Never come back.
Yeah.
And he never will.
I understand.
And it's like because you ruined what made the game great to me. And he's never been someone who's like doesn't believe players should get paid.
Yeah.
It's just like, but you're willing to sacrifice the game for that? Like, no. Because again, who are the people that are paying these players? It's not owners. It's us at the end of the day. It's my dad, who's a father of 2 kids who, drove a truck and to make sure we had food on the table and worked hard. And neither one of my parents graduated high school, much less went to college.
That originally, that is the connection.
Right.
Originally, once radio rights, TV rights, streaming rights, once all of that stuff started coming in, that was outside of ticket sales, concession sales, the direct connection to the consumer was broken.
Right.
Because now this is our focus as far as revenue.
Right.
Like we look at revenue as far as ticket sales, like that's pennies.
Exactly.
That's pennies. So now we don't have to care about the direct connection to the consumer and how they feel.
Right.
We have to service the politics of the big money. And that's why they ended up missing the postseason in the World Series. It was about the big money, and it's the same thing that's happening.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Your father right now is the one that's being punished because the Reds have one of the best farm systems.
Well,
like they're about to go into probably one of the.
He'd have had to deal with a lot of bull crap from 1994 to now to get
that
to
is
this.
True.
He was
that
still
is
a
true.
Reds fan
That is
because they
true.
had a lot of sucky years.
That is true.
But it was more so just the game. My dad loved the game.
But your dad had the Barry Larkin years, the Chris Sable years.
My dad was more of a Big Red Machine guy.
Oh,
he became a Reds fan. Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez. My first favorite player for the Reds was actually eventually became Barry Larkin, but my first favorite player for the Reds was Dave Concepcion.
Nice.
That was my first guy because he was because I was a shortstop, and your favorite players usually, at least for me, was the guy that played the position that I wanted to play. So Larkin wasn't even with the Reds yet. Dave Concepcion was the shortstop for the Reds back then, and like for me too, like I'm done with this. I'm just, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of this other thing. I just want to watch the game.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't talk politics on the show, because I have a very strong, I don't care what your politics are. You can say whatever you want. Take your stance. I mean, some of the greatest athletes ever have taken very strong stances about certain issues. But when I'm watching a game, I don't want to hear the announcers talking about whatever political issue that they want to talk about. Let me freaking watch the game.
Let me watch the game.
You know what I mean?
I fully understand that. Yeah, I fully understand.
And for people that care about athletes off the field, then they can listen to what they say off the field. But I don't want to hear about it when I'm watching the game. So there's just all these things where they no longer really care about us anymore. That's what it comes down to.
That's evident.
Yeah, that's evident. And that hurts the game. And so if they don't care about us, it used to be to where there were certain things you just couldn't do because you didn't want to turn the fan base off. And it's like they don't really care about that anymore.
Oh.
Eventually it's going to hurt you, though, because Major League Baseball didn't think it was going to – Major League Baseball kept saying, well, the fans will come back. They'll come back. And some of them did, but clearly not like it used to be. I mean, NBA, same way. There was a time when the NBA was arguably the most popular sport in America. I mean, it started with Bird and Magic in the 80s, and then, of course, Michael took it to a whole new level in the 90s. And the NBA hasn't recovered from what it was back then. I mean, you go look at the numbers for them. I mean, I've heard people – numbers now for playoff games are not anywhere close to what they were 20, 30 years ago, right? Because some fans are just, you forget about us after a while. And you say, well, we're going to play to the wealthy class. Well, there's a lot less of them than there is of us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like Notre Dame games. Notre Dame doesn't – how can they make it more affordable? They don't care to make it more affordable for you. They don't. They don't care that the local South Bend dad, father of 4, can afford to bring his kids to a game. They don't care.
No.
They care about the wealthy donors and the people that do have that kind of money, because they don't care about and that's why Notre Dame, for example, is not a community program. just because they don't care, and they make it known. I think the football players do, and Marcus Freeman and what they're doing clearly is that. But as an institution, it's like Notre Dame. They even have their own zip code and city. It's like Notre Dame, Indiana. It's just a campus.
It's like the Vatican.
They're not even South Bend anymore. It's Notre Dame, Indiana. Like literally,
it's Notre Dame, Indiana.
We get mail. Our PO box is actually delivered to campus. We have a PO box on campus. So my wife's business and then my technical business, because I didn't want my official business address to be our home. You know what I mean? So we have a PO box there, and it's literally Notre Dame, Indiana. It's not even part of South Bend anymore. Wow. So that is what it is. But that's quite a long rant. It's the SEC got us on that one a little bit. So let's get to a few more here before we got to go, Sean. Here's an interesting one from John A1.
It's the 23 season Last Chance U for Al Golden in an effort to be a head coach at the Power 5 or NFL level.
Do you have a I would say, Sean, I would say no, but he at least has to start going in the right direction. Like, I don't think if Notre Dame's really good on defense this year and Al Golden doesn't get a head coaching job this offseason, it doesn't mean he'll never get one again if he wants one. I would say if they have a bad year, it could be. But I don't think, in theory, he has to get a head coaching job this year or he's never going to get one. And that may not be what you're asking, John.
Yeah.
But I would say, like, if Notre Dame's really good on defense again this year and he stays for one more year and they're really good again in 24, he can get one in 2024. Because sometimes you're beholden to what's out there.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of coaching turnover the last couple of years, Sean. A lot of coaching turnover. And so sometimes when you have 2-3 years in a row of a lot of turnover, there's going to be a year or two where there's just not a lot of big jobs coming open. And so you got to be careful, because I think one thing Al Golden learned in his previous coaching rise is not every job is a good job, especially for you. You got to fit right. And Al Golden was never embraced at Miami. Now, he did things that, but he was just probably never going to be embraced at Miami.
Yeah. You have to think fit. Fit is very important.
Tom O'Brien going to NC State, Randy Edsall going to Maryland. I mean, there's just some coaches I think can fit anywhere, but not all of them. There's some coaches like, hey man, you need to stay in the North, or hey man, you need to stay in the South. Like would Bobby Bowden have been accepted by Ohio State fans? Did he win? Because Ohio, the only difference between the blue collar state like Ohio and a state like what Georgia used to be or Florida used to be back then is the accent. You recognize, hey, he's blue collar, we're blue collar, we're not like LA. You know what I mean? Now, could Bobby Bowden have thrived at USC? No, I don't think so. I don't think you put that guy out in Hollywood, and I don't think he resonates with West Coast kids the way that he would have with Ohio kids, right?
No. That's why Pete was so special,
right,
at USC, and I think
he
USC
was Hollywood.
Yes, and USC has been trying to find that.
Yeah,
ever since he left, he was just the way he related to everyone, the way he LA has so much to do. And the fact that he was able to bring the eyes of LA to that team, that just showed you the genius of him as a personality and a coach, And then the job he's done with Seattle. Think about that. He goes from LA, glitz and glamour, and then goes to Seattle in an NFL coaching situation, and he's able to win. That he is a chameleon. In a sense, he's that type of coach that you can really put anywhere, and he will probably be successful.
Yep. And not all coaches that way.
No.
I don't know that Dabo could thrive at Notre Dame. I don't know that he could run his program at Notre Dame the way he did it at Clemson. Yeah. It doesn't take away from the greatness of the job that he did. It just, some things work at some places, they don't work at others.
Yeah.
Just the reality of it.
Yeah.
So I think fit is important. I mean, look, Randy Edsall didn't forget how to coach football when he went to Maryland, guys. Tom O'Brien didn't forget how to coach football when he went to NC State. It's just different kind of kid, different fit.
Yeah.
And So, like Lou Holtz could say, well, Lou Holtz's shtick wouldn't work in the SEC. It did.
It did.
I mean, it wasn't the SEC at the time; it was the Southwest Conference. But the Southwest Conference then is what the SEC is kind of now. You know what I mean? When you think about the teams.
I mean, Lou won in South Carolina.
Yeah, not to the degree that he did at other places. Like he didn't win an Orange Bowl and all that.
He elevated it.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, from where it was.
Oh yeah.
Lou did a pretty good job. But they were competitive.
The point is, like, you think a guy that's going to do that at a blue collar kind of upper place like Notre Dame. Well, he did that at Arkansas. He was pretty. I mean, he was pretty good at NC State too. Like you think, like, how'd that shtick work in the South? Yeah. Because he's just that guy, But not every guy can be like that, right? And we'll find out. We'll find out if Brian Kelly can be that guy long term. I have my doubts, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe he is that guy who can win everywhere. We'll find out. But no, it's going to be a big year for him in that regard as well, Sean, because they should be better this year than they were last year, I think. Yeah. I like their roster coming back. I really do.
Yeah. I actually, in a show this week, I said this defense, in my opinion, is on Al Golden.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're in year two now.
Yeah. I was like, look, don't tell me you don't have the pieces, because you do. You have pieces this year. So when we come to game plan and adjustments, all of that, coaching, whatever else you want to throw in the bowl, you should have the ingredients to have a top 10 defense.
At least top 15, right?
At least top 15. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Year one, you can say, hey, look, there's this reason, that reason, new staff, everybody's learning your defense. It's complex. I get all that, right? I mean, look, even Brian Van Gorder's defense got better in year two, Sean. A lot better in year two. It still wasn't good.
Yeah.
But it got a lot better in year two. Just because they know what you want. And they knew how to overcome the badness of what you're trying to, with that 2015 team. Absolutely. I don't think they have to do that with Al Golden. I don't think there's like unsoundness to what he's doing. There's some bad calls. Everybody makes bad calls. The safety blitz against Ohio State was a bad call. And you know who else will agree that was a bad call? Al Golden.
Al Golden.
I guarantee you Al Golden looks back now, is like, he may have said it at a press conference. I don't know that he did. But I guarantee if you were sitting there talking ball with Al Golden, you say, hey, what would you have called there if you could change it? Sometimes like, hey, I would have called the same thing. I guarantee he'd be like, you know what? Looking back now, knowing what I know then, yeah, it was the right call.
He got caught in the presence, right? And maybe that's one of the things of being first-time defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. You're caught in the moment,
right? Not
understanding and looking at, oh, we just lost him on that last play.
Yeah,
this is what Ryan Day is probably going to do. There is a lot that happened that with more experience in the position, he probably would have picked up on things and said, this is what I would call.
Yeah.
But because Tariq is down, this is what we have to do in this situation.
And because there was people have pointed this out, there was a timeout.
Timeout, yes.
It wasn't like Tariq limped off the field and somebody hustled in real quick and they didn't have time to see it. There was a timeout. Because you're getting caught, like you said, in the moment of, this is the call we practiced in this situation. This is the call we're going to. Without having that, I know my team, I know my this, and we can't do that now. And would he have made that same call in week 10? I don't know, but I definitely don't think he's going to make it in year 2. Or he may still make it, but now his players know it better. It wasn't Jaden Mickey's first career game ever. Jaden's going to have a better idea of how to play that route now. That's the other part of this too, is he's going to know to play that route differently. You can't give up the post there, and you can't bite that first move. Well, Jaden's going to be a lot more prepared to handle that on September 23rd if he's put in that same situation after a whole year plus 4 more games than he was in the first game of his college career, to your point. So, yeah, you expect him to make those improvements, and I think that he will. I'm really not as concerned about the defense as some people are, unless we just see regression from a bunch of dudes. I'm really not. I really think this defense is going to be pretty good. I don't think it's going to – I don't know how good, but I think it's definitely going to be a top 20 defense. The question, Sean, is can it be a top 10 defense? Yeah. This is not a debate for me of if it's going to be good or bad. It's not. It's going to be good. The question is going to be how good. That's going to have a bigger determiner on the season.
Well said. Yep.
All right, let's get to this one here.
Irish Gordian knot. Last year, they lagged on defensive line recruiting. That caused issues with top end guys, parentheses Scott. And this year, there was a lapse in O-line recruiting, parentheses Lambert. What has the staff done? What can they do about this?
I don't know that I would say that there was a lapse with Gibby Lambert as much as it's just when there's a transition and you go through a few weeks before Joe Rudolph was hired, at least a couple of weeks before Joe Rudolph was hired, where other schools are recruiting a kid, and then you bring in a new coach who doesn't have that same connection and relationship with the kid. So I don't know if I would say it's a lapse unless you're just referring to that as a lapse in time, right? Maybe that's it, perhaps. I don't know if I'd say a lapse is just circumstances were tough. And so, and again, we don't know that they're not going to get Gibby Lambert. I had an intel piece on it, which I'm sure that you read, Irish Gordy not. But, I don't know that I would say it was a lapse. But to specific to your point, what can be done about it? And I think with the defensive line recruiting, Sean, it's just come up with a better plan and make sure that the plan is being stuck to, and make sure that your coach knows he has to recruit the entire board. I think there's a different issue with Al Washington than there is with Chris O'Leary, for example. And we had some dude on the chat yesterday saying, why don't you ever attack Chris O'Leary for his recruiting? They were getting on us for we were being hard on Al Washington. More so me. Of course, he points out, why weren't you ever hard on these 3 white coaches and you're only hard on this one black coach, which I'm sure Brian Polian and Brian Kelly and Jeff Quinn would
disagree.
Have some words with you on this, which is it's just silly and petty. But there's always circumstances are different, right? Why was I more willing to give Chris O'Leary a pass his first year or two than Al Washington? Is because Chris O'Leary was a brand new coach who was like 20-something years old and never done this before. Well, we're in year 3 now. You need to figure it out now, right? So now you're going to be held to a higher standard. Why am I holding Al Washington to a different standard than Joe Rudolph to a different standard than Al Washington? Well, it's what he inherited, number one, and the nature of that position. There's always certain circumstances that come down to it. I think with Coach Washington, the thing with him is, I think it's just about you've got to be more organized and consistent with what you're doing. I think it's a big issue for Coach Washington. With Coach O'Leary, because there's some kids that Coach Washington really connects with, and there's periods of time during Justin Scott's recruitment, Sean, where you've talked to him and it's like, yeah, that's my guy. We talk all the time. And then it's like, well, we talk every couple of weeks. It should never be it should be the same throughout the entire time. With Chris O'Leary, you're now at the point now where you say, hey, I don't know if he has the chops at this point in time. Without Washington, I think he's got the chops. I don't think he has the discipline yet to be an impact recruiter, in my opinion. Where when you look at the great class he had at Ohio State, you recruited literally an elite linebacking class that only could be rivaled by Notre Dame's, but they were literally all in-state kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different deal than you have to go all over the country and get Justin Scott from Illinois and Logan Thomas from Texas and Elijah Rushing from Arizona. It's a whole different animal, right? So you got to be real disciplined with the way you approach your recruiting process. I think that's the bigger issue for Al Washington. Not that he can't be a good recruiter. It's that he's not, because he's not consistent enough in carrying those things out. With Chris O'Leary, my question is now, if you can't finish this class off right, I don't know that you got the chops to recruit at this level. And so it's a little different. So I think there are things that you can, point being, there are things that I think are fixable with Al Washington moving forward, that if he does them, he'll be fine. With Chris O'Leary, if he doesn't do a better job, it's just kind of like, I don't know what's missing. Like you're working hard, you're calling kids, you talk to kids, you're a good coach, but you're not getting the job done. You just, for whatever reason, you don't have the chops to be good here, to get it done here. Right. And sometimes that's the case as well. With O-line recruiting, it just takes time. Sean, you and I talked about this a lot yesterday. O-line recruiting is a different animal, man. And yes, we can have opinions and feelings and praises or criticisms of the job Joe Rudolph does this year, but the 25 class is going to be the one where we're really going to be able to look at him and say, how are you going to do in this class?
Yeah.
Do you have the chops to make it here? It'll be that class that tells us that, not so much the finish here. But I'll say this, if he does finish with Gibby Lambert, that's a big win because you had to come back from it. But it isn't something where I'm like, okay, he's great, he's wonderful, because you were leading for that guy when you got hired. Mm-hmm. You just had to, overcome some things and get back on top. It's still the 25 year. Even with success this year, I think next year is still going to be the year that defines the job he's doing, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
So, but what can be done about it? I mean,
and I don't
go get it done.
Lagged on D-line recruiting. I think you summed everything up. I think Notre Dame. It's almost like going to. It's almost like walking in the store and going shopping, and then realize you didn't bring, when you go to check out, you didn't bring the right card. It's like, oh man, I don't have enough on this card. And that was Notre Dame last year with the defensive line haul they had. Like they went out and dude, you get Brennan Vernon, you get Keon Keeley, and man, that's expensive without placing it in an NIL conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That's expensive territory, and if you don't have enough to see it through to the end, whether that's time and faith or whatever, then that's tough. That's tough. And I think Notre Dame recognized and has had to make some adjustments on the run as a staff to really find their fit of how aggressive they can be, going after certain kids, and then having a realistic view of what's really going on with kids and knowing when to fall off and knowing when to stay aggressive on a kid. Like, I don't know if they stay on Caleb Beasley.
Yeah.
In previous years.
No, Sean. You know.
Trying to be nice.
The interest they wouldn't have.
And that's the cost. And I think they're going to learn a lesson with this Justin Scott situation. Win or lose. They're going to learn from it. They will. Hopefully they will. And you move forward. But I don't think their effort is lagging as far as what they want to do. I just think certain coaches aren't holding up. Like Brian said, look, it's not like you fans don't see it. And so we're not telling you anything new. I look at a kid. I just sent them a congratulations yesterday, Jair Hill from Kankakee. He graduated yesterday. I sent them a congratulations. He's going up to Michigan, and he was high on Notre Dame. Notre Dame was high on him. Something happened with the relationship. It might have been grade related. I'm not sure. But either way, he fell off, and then he ends up having a fantastic senior year, not only on the gridiron, but in track and field as well. You talk about a 4-star rangy kid at safety. That's him. But like you said, you don't know the dynamics of what happened from Notre Dame being at the top of his list to just communication broke off. Then he ends up in Michigan. That's recruiting, man.
Who was that you were talking about?
Jair Hill out of Kankakee, Illinois.
Yeah. So it was an evaluation decision, right? I mean, and that's always going to be a miss that everybody has.
Yeah.
To me, recruiting is part of evaluation, but you can evaluate all you want. You got to be able to get those kids. And that's just what, at the end of the day, this is what the article I wrote earlier today. This is going to, and you and I talked about yesterday, the success in June is going to define how good of a recruiting staff this defensive staff is.
Yeah.
Flat out. It's going to tell us a lot.
I'll give you another name. There's a kid. His mom is a childhood friend of mine. His name is Kenneth Grant, defensive tackle. He is supposed to be the next great defensive tackle at Michigan as a sophomore. And I talked to his mom, and I'm like, did Notre Dame ever? Like, no, not really. And he was from Maryville. So that just goes to show you, man, that some slip through the crack for whatever reason. And the evaluation, like Brian says, is about preference, right?
Right. Fit, preference.
Preference, all of that. Like, you can sit and watch film, and we can see two totally different things. I can come away like, oh man, I love that kid, and so
Yeah.
Brian can come away saying he's good. He's good. I'm not saying he's great, but he's good.
Or vice versa.
And vice versa. Yeah. So I'm not about to say the staff lags as far as certain areas in recruiting. As far as getting people to sign, what's obvious needs not be. We need not say it and talk about it again. It is what it is.
We got a super chat here from Just Your Ordinary
Joe. Sean, thought of you at the grocery store last week. Couldn't resist grabbing a box of Crunch Berries, but it's cool. I also threw in a box of Special K. That's funny.
I gotta know this one, Sean. What's this about?
Joe, I was telling everyone that I love Crunch Berries and I love Fruit Loops, right? And for a short time when my father was sick, we stayed with my parents to make sure we helped in taking care of him. Mm-hmm. And my parents are strictly Special K, Cheerios. Like, this is the healthiest pantry you'll see when it comes to cereals. And this Special K strawberry with real strawberries, I fell in love with it during this time. And it's like, I talk about it all the time on the podcast, and people are like, Special K. And I'm like, go try it. I was like, I'm telling you, I consider myself a savant of cereals. And I'm trying to tell you, this Special K is something to check out. And I'm glad, Joe, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Crunch Berries is my favorite cereal. I haven't eaten a lot of cereal lately.
Sometimes
my second favorite cereal is though, Sean, honestly.
What's that?
And I can't have it by itself, but Rice Krispie with cut up bananas and honey.
That sounds good. It's
very good.
But see, with the Crunch Berries, you have to get a roof of your mouth a break sometimes.
Yes, you do. You cannot consistently have it. No. Eventually you'll be biting it goes up in your brain because you just rubbed the top of your mouth. You know what else is the milk of Crunch Berries is also incredibly underrated. Drinking the milk afterwards is very underrated.
I agree.
It's very underrated.
I feel the same way about Fruit Loops. I agree.
Yeah. See, I don't like Fruit Loops all that much, but the milk of Fruit Loops is to me better than the actual Fruit Loops. So yeah. Angela likes Fruit Loops. I should start doing something with her where she eats the Fruit Loops and I'll drink the milk. Yes. There you go.
Yes. No one breaks down or eats the cereal like Sean Davis.
Nobody does.
No.
You said savant, man, so I'm not even going to try to get into this conversation with you.
Absolutely.
And try to disagree with you.
I have a special way of doing it.
Yeah.
I have a special way of doing it.
Yeah, do you remember growing up OJ's?
Vaguely.
That orange cereal was my mom bought that one time. That was the nastiest stuff.
Yeah, vaguely. Now, are you a small bowl or big bowl guy?
Well, at this stage of my life, more medium.
Okay.
I mean, I used to get mixing bowls out when I was in college. You remember the scene from Friday? That was me when I was in college and in my 20s.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, when you grow up with three boys, because man, cereal box, let's say a large cereal box might be 7-8 servings. Mm-hmm. Because we had three boys and we had nice sized bowls. So that's, we're hitting mom up and like Wednesday, like, yeah, we need some more cereal.
Yeah.
Because it didn't last. So absolutely, man.
Yeah. With three boys, I bet you guys went through cereal real fast. But no, I was definitely I guess I never got a bowl quite that big. Right. But I mean, like my mom had this brown bowl. It was like this. And that's what I would have cereal in. So yeah, when I was in high school and when I'd visit during the summer, or I'd come home for summer when I was in college, my mom had to make sure that she was stocked up on cereals. Yeah. There's no doubt. Yeah. And she would do that even when I was an adult and I'm coming home to visit next week. She would always make sure she had Crunch Berries, and Raisin Bran. Because I used to love Raisin Bran, but I have to put sugar on Raisin Bran, and I'm trying not to eat as much sugar anymore. I can't tell you last time I've actually added sugar to something, like that. So I can't really eat Raisin because I can't just eat Raisin Bran by itself. I just don't like it enough by itself.
Gotcha.
But you get Raisin Bran where you put enough sugar in there to kind of get it sweet, get the milk sweet. I really like that.
Yeah.
But I don't really do that anymore. That's why I like Rice Krispies, because like when I was a kid, I'd put sugar on Rice Krispies because they just don't have a ton of flavor by themselves.
Yeah.
But when I discovered, I can't even remember how I figured it out, but I started putting honey on it, and it's really good. And then I started slicing bananas and putting it in there, and it's like, okay, that's the way to go. That's the way to go with Rice Krispies now. Although, hey, Sean, I made my first Rice Krispies treats the other day.
How did they turn out?
Pretty good. Angela loves Rice Krispie treats, and so I went home for Memorial Day this past weekend to see my family. My mom makes really good Rice Krispie treats, and so I was supposed to bring some home, and I forgot. And my mom said they weren't good anyway. I guess something happened, the pan or whatever, that she didn't think they were good. My mom's a little bit perfectionist. Things that she doesn't think turn out good, everybody else loves. You know what I mean?
Right.
But so I forgot. So Ange was like, "Man, I felt really bad." So and she kept dropping hints about, "Man, this recipe is really easy." I'm like, okay, then go do it. Then it should be no problem. But you could tell she wanted somebody else to make it. You know, it's sometimes you love something, and it's like it's better when somebody else makes it for you. I didn't realize how easy they were. I mean, it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, this isn't good that she now knows how to make them. But let me ask you this: your 5 favorite cereals. You can only have 5 cereals the rest of your life. What would they be?
Oh,
you can rotate them. So I'll start giving you mine as you think about it. Obviously, Crunch Berries, Cocoa Puffs, because I got to mix in the chocolate one every now and then. Fruity Pebbles. I'd go Rice Krispies because I can put sugar and honey on it. And then number 5 is Apple Jacks. Would be mine. I'm torn between Apple Jacks and Corn Pops because I really like Corn Pops too. Or Pops, I guess is what they're called. Those would be my 5. Those are my 5s.
Okay, I'm going to start out with, of course, Crunch Berries, without a doubt. I'm going to put Honey Nut Cheerios on there.
Okay.
I like me a good Honey Nut Cheerio.
Heart healthy, they say.
Yes. As much as I've grown, as much as I've learned to love and I have learned to love it, the Special K, I would not put it in my top 5 that I would have to eat for the rest of my life. So I'm going to go Fruit Loops, Crunch Berries, Honey Nut Cheerios. Apple Jacks, I was really never a big fan of. Cinnamon Toast Crunch would have to make the top 5.
Also good milk. Very good milk.
And because I loved it so much as a kid, Trix.
I couldn't do Trix. I didn't like Trix as a kid. I love
Trix as a kid.
Yeah. Tricks are for kids.
Yeah. So I'll throw one of my favorite childhood memories in there.
Frosted Flakes would be a very close runner up for me. I do like Frosted Flakes too. Somebody said honeycombs. I haven't had honeycombs in a while, but I liked honeycombs. And the honeycombs aren't as rough on your top of your mouth as like some of the others are either.
It's weird. Honey Smacks for a while were okay.
Yeah.
They were like a second, third option for me, but I like Honey Smacks.
You know, I think the other brand version of what would be Golden Crisps, I think are better than Honey Smacks.
Was that the one you can't get enough Super Golden Crisps?
Yeah.
It's got the crunch with punch.
And it has
I never had those. Yeah. I never had
those. Those are a better version of what you just said. Honey Smacks. Okay. Better version of that, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, because I had a thing about I don't like buying generic stuff. It's just I'm fine with it now, but there's a reason for it that has to do with stuff. Yeah. But I remember the first time my mom bought the generic version of Honey Smacks Golden Crisp.
Yeah,
I'm not eating this crap. This is generic. Like, I hate being poor. And then I'm like, oh, these are legit.
Right.
Like, they're really good.
Right.
They're the best version of that particular cereal is the generic version.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I was like, okay, I take it back. All the mean things I said about us getting generic cereal, Mom. Sorry. These are legit. Keep buying them. And they come in such bigger bags. That's what also is great about it, because there's more. So yeah.
It's funny. I don't see anybody in the chat. We haven't mentioned it. I don't see anybody talking about Lucky Charms.
I like Lucky Charms, but they're not. Like, I like them, but they're not. I don't love them. I think it's a cereal that everybody likes, but nobody loves. Well, my wife loves them. Maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it's a female thing. I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting. Nobody said that one yet. Nobody missed that. Nobody said that one. Yeah, you're right. Somebody said Life, Cinnamon Life. I liked.
I remember Cinnamon Life.
I liked Cinnamon Life. I like that one for sure. Yep. Somebody's Jay Wick, and I think this is kind of Lucky Charms. It's like two comments that I think kind of describe Lucky Charms. He says, Lucky Charms for the marshmallows, the cereal part sucks. And I would agree with that. Because and then Father David Penny said, after one bowl of Lucky Charms, your gut is killing you. That's probably one of the things that I would say is part of it for me.
Yeah.
I always feel weird after you eat Lucky Charms. I'm like, what's in these things? But it is funny because like well, here, I'll ask you, Mr. Cereal Savant. Do you just eat your cereal all together, like Crunch Berries and stuff like that? Because I'll eat out the barrels first and then eat out the berries last.
Now, okay, this is how I'm not weird. I'm just telling you I do things differently. There are certain cereals.
When you got to lead with "I'm not weird,"
not weird. I'm not weird.
It's gonna be good.
I'm not weird. Do you remember the old school thermos? They used to be part of the old school lunch pails.
Oh yeah, my dad had one of those. Yeah,
right. One of my favorite things to do was to put a little milk in there and then put the rest cereal and just mash it up, and I would actually kind of drink it as a cereal. I was the first one to really do a cereal smoothie back in the day.
Yeah. You're not weird.
Okay.
That's weird. But that's weird.
But I
You're
also
not weird.
See, I will eat a bowl of cereal, no milk.
And I see certain cereals,
I would sit there. I've sat there with like a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios.
Yeah, when we didn't have milk. Yeah,
we had milk, but I just prefer like if I was doing it with a snack and just wanted to eat it.
You know what? If I'm at a hotel and I'm going to grab a bowl, like a box of cereal to just take with me on the road.
Yeah.
You know the cereal I would always go to? It was Fruit Loops. Fruit Loops I actually like without milk. Like as a little snack, you're having a couple at a time. I'll eat Fruit Loops that way. Some cereals I don't mind doing that with. Some cereals I just need milk. Right? Like some
I understand that. Like, I understand that.
I could eat Crunch Berries without milk. I could eat Fruit Loops without milk. Here's
the test. Here's the true
Frosted
test.
Mini Wheats without milk.
Here's the true test. Do you eat cereal with the box next to you, or do you actually put it back up before you start eating?
Depends on which part of my life you're talking about. Now I pour it, put milk in, and put the box away.
Okay, so you've been domesticated then.
Well, it's because the things on the back aren't as fun to read anymore as when I was a kid. And it's also to help prevent me from just eating the third and the fourth bowl.
So, well, I could care less what was on the box. It was all about the second pour that was coming.
Well, when I was a kid, like, and we'll move on to football topics here in a second, I swear. When I was a kid, though, but like Captain Crunch and Crunch Berries had like really cool like things on the back, you know. So like I had an aunt, my Aunt Dixie, wonderful woman. She had 3 daughters, all older than me. And my Uncle Marty had daughters, and my mom, my other sibling, is a daughter. And my Uncle Larry had 3 boys, but they were not around as much. So like the 3 families that we were around a lot, I was the only boy. And so she was like she taught me how to spell my own name. You know, when my mom was working and hanging out with her, she taught me how to spell things and different things like that. And, so she was just awesome, but she would, every time I'd go visit her, like she'd have her kids like having like junk cereal and stuff like that. But when Brian was coming to spend the night, she'd get like Crap Crunch. And so they always liked when I came to spend the night because she would buy the good cereal. But I just remember like having like the mazes and the different like, games that you could play. That's why I liked Captain Crunch and Crunch Berries and have the box with me, because you can actually do stuff while you're eating the box. But now it's more, I put it away now because I'm trying to avoid the second and third pour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
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 And I always have to put a little bit of fresh milk on it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see that. Have you ever shared milk? Now, this goes back to the days when you might not have been, as well off
Yeah.
as a family.
No, I don't remember doing that.
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
I've done that with my brothers.
You better put some water on.
You come in, and they actually use the last of the milk for their bowl of cereal, and you tell your mom, and your mom is like, "Yo, you use whatever milk is left over."
We never had that.
We've done it. We
had OJ one time. They tried to convince us that it's good with having OJ on it because we didn't have any milk.
Wow.
But I just thought of that scene in Friday where he's like, what are you doing? Throwing this away. Why? We ain't got no milk. You better put some water on it.
Put water in it. Yeah. Yeah.
Because we have all been there.
Yeah.
Oh, man. No, I may have. I just don't remember.
Yo.
Sure.
Hey, man. I remember we did that. So now what it made us do, we became very vocal about, yo, the milk is almost gone. Like, we're not going to get to the point where we have to share milk. Just have a bowl of cereal.
Yep. Oh, good times. Good times. Let's see here. Nathan Milton with a question here.
Is there any freshman not on campus yet that you could foresee making a position change?
There's not one that I will predict is going to make a position change, but if they ever got into a pinch at slot receiver or running back, I would absolutely say, hey, where's Micah Bell currently on the depth chart?
Yeah.
And can we have him?
Yeah.
Absolutely. That would be one that I could see being a guy that I could foresee a change on. Again, not predicting it, not saying it's going to happen.
No.
But he's one that I could see because I'm not moving Christian Gray, even though I think Christian Gray could help out at receiver. I'm not moving him because he's going to be playing right away. But that'd be one. And then he said not on campus, so I can't because I was going to say Preston Zinter, but he's already on campus. None of the. Caleb Smith, I'm not. None of the offensive linemen, I'm not moving to the offense. Although, if I really needed a big beefy nose tackle and I was loaded on the offensive line, I would have no problem saying, "Hey, Charles Jagasaw, you want to come eat up space?" He wasn't a bad defensive lineman.
No, not at all.
As a senior in high school. So, but again, I don't foresee that one.
Yeah.
Although that's one that could happen. But no, Micah Bell's the first one that pops in my head quickly.
Yeah, but not as a freshman.
No.
Not as a freshman. I mentioned one that could actually play a different position, but I don't think he would play it as a freshman. That would be something later on, maybe.
Yeah.
That you would see. Yeah.
All right. Here's one from Terry Gillery.
Is Parker a conservative play caller or is he a letter rip type?
Well, we don't know the answer to that yet because he's never been a full-time play caller. We talked about this on the show Wednesday that I did, Sean, though. I think he's going to be an aggressive play caller.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is it going to be full letter rip? I don't know about that because when I think letter rip, I think like too extreme, like, too aggressive, too many chances, a lot of turnovers. I think he's going to be an aggressive play caller. I do. I think we're going to see a much more aggressive Notre Dame offense, tempo-wise, throwing the ball down the field-wise, attacking for width and, distance.
Mm-hmm.
Going much more aggressive, going after matchups and things like that. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think Parker, one thing I'm curious to see if I'm right on this, but I have a feeling Parker is going to be a guy, Sean, that says, I'm going to keep running this until you stop it. I'm going to keep going to this matchup until you stop it. Because I think he's going to be a little bit less of I'm really smart and I'm going, and a lot of times really smart guys feel the need. And it's not even about ego with all of them. It's just because I feel like I have to show my full thing, and I'm always trying to outsmart you, and I'm always trying to show, like, look at this concept and how I use this triple motion, this, that, and the other to get a guy open. And some coaches are just like, yeah, if you're going to line up that guy on my guy, we're just going to keep going at it till you stop it or do something different. Mm-hmm. That's not showing me how smart. It's not me telling the world how smart I am because look how these 87 different plays that I ran in a quarter and a half. But it's effective. And it's aggressive, and I could see Parker being a little bit like that too, where it's like, hey, I don't always have to show them how smart I am because they're just giving us that, and I'm going to keep taking it. until they figure out a way to stop it. I could see that as well, but I think that's aggressive. I do. I think
I
that's
really
aggressive.
I would say Jared Parker didn't have the money, so he asked Tommy Rees to buy him a lottery ticket. And the ticket that he bought for Jared Parker is the one that was the winning ticket.
Yeah, it's Willy Wonka, the original Willy Wonka.
Yeah, in the form of Sam Hartman. Like as an OC at Notre Dame, first time OC, he had Sam Hartman. That's something that not even Tommy Rees had during this time. And that blame falls on Tommy Rees.
Sure. To a degree, yeah.
But if you're going to walk into a situation, you feel pretty lucky that, you're starting with Sam Hartman as the quarterback and you build from there. And, as Malik said, you don't have Sam Hartman and then ask him to hand the ball off.
Right. Right.
So that
there's two mistakes you make with Sam Hartman. Asking him to carry the team the same way he did at Wake Forest, where all the pressure's on him.
Absolutely.
And then you bring him in here to run the offense you ran with Ian Book in 2020.
Right.
You don't do either one of those things. Or the offense you ran last year with Drew Pine. You don't do either one of those things. You let him be aggressive, but then use the stuff around him so he doesn't have to do it all by himself. And that's why that's one of the reasons I'm so optimistic about this team.
Yeah. So I would say he is more of a let her rip or more of a, let's do what works best for us.
And we're going to be aggressive doing it.
Yes. Yeah.
But being aggressive doesn't mean I'm not going to run the ball 12 times in a row if you can't stop it. I mean, that's smart coaching. Like literally we just ran the ball right down their throat because they kept, playing us this way and we're just going to keep handing the ball off.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what that can happen sometimes when you're an RPO heavy team.
Yeah.
Is they just keep playing to stop the RPO and we just kept running it 6 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards, 7 yards. I mean, we just ran that sucker right down your throat.
Mm-hmm.
That's good, but that's aggressive. I mean, to me, aggressive doesn't mean you're dropping back and throwing it 50 yards every time.
No.
It means you're looking to attack. You're looking to figure out ways to create big play opportunities all the time. And sometimes that requires setting things up. Sometimes that requires just doing certain things that says, hey, we're gonna try to just get this ISO. Sometimes it means we're going to come out early in the first quarter and we're going to show 12, 13 personnel and run it at them because they tend to overreact to this. But what I'm really trying to do is set up this big play opportunity at the end of the first series or in my second series or something like that. That's all part of the gamesmanship of being a coordinator and a play caller. That's honestly some of the more fun. Like I'm going to do these three things because I know once I do those three things, they're going to overreact and do this, and I'm going to hit them with this. I mean, that's some of my favorite memories as a coach are doing things like that. Like I think I've shared this before. One of my funnest memories and funniest memories of coaching was we were playing Iona College. And they were starting a little bit of a comeback. We're at the 3rd and goal 6-yard line. Head coach goes down the list of coaches. He would always get to me last. Hey, what do you think we should do here? Oh, our quarterback. So we should throw a fade to Michael. And of course, everybody, throw a fade to Michael. Michael's our best receiver. He was a stud.
Mm-hmm.
And so coach gets to me and he goes, well, Driscoll, I assume you think we should run. I said, what do you think we should run? I said, I think we should want to run a draw. It was why? It's because everybody in the stadium clearly thinks we should throw a fade to Michael. We ran a draw and just walked into the end zone, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's part of the gamesmanship of it, right? Is what do they think I'm going to run here?
Yeah.
What are their tendencies saying? Well, when we get in the red zone, I mean, Michael had 51 catches and 14 touchdowns. We threw him a lot in the red zone. Well, they knew that, and we were going to come out and use that against them. And that's part of the fun of calling plays and designing offenses is some of that gamesmanship. But sometimes you just got to say, hey, this isn't about how smart I am. They literally cannot stop this, and we're just going to keep going at it and bury this team. And I'd like to see a little bit of that. Because wasn't it frustrating at times over the years, Sean, where it's like something would work and then like we just wouldn't see it again?
This
isn't just Tommy. This was true under Chip. This was true under at Denbrock at times as well, where it's like, dude, you guys killed him with that. And then why did you go away from it? It's like, and we see it on defense too. Like, I'll never understand. Diaco was killing Florida State in 2011. And then just in the second half, just decided to stop being aggressive because I don't know if he like convinced himself they were going to make an adjustment that they never made,
right?
Or what? But that stuff kills me, man. That stuff really kills me.
Sometimes you can fool yourself as a coach, right?
Yeah.
You can talk yourself, and the great coaches will, like you said, man, they force you to stop it. They force you to adjust, right? Because if you adjust, I already have the counter ready. So I'm waiting for you to adjust because I'm setting you up for the counter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think Notre Dame has an advantage, especially against Ohio State with it being an early game.
Man, I hope so.
That Ohio State really – Notre Dame doesn't have to show much, in my opinion, early on film to beat the teams that they're playing early. So by the time they get to Ohio State walks in not knowing what – Notre Dame could literally go into Navy, Tennessee State, and run the ball down their throat, dominate physically, and win going away. And then come out 3-4 wide against Ohio State like, aha, we got you. Because what you want to do against Ohio State is jump out early on them. You want their quarterback to have to feel the pressure.
Or vice versa, Sean.
Yes.
You just come out and you're throwing the ball all over the yard on Navy and just ripping them up. And then you come out your first series against Ohio State and they've been playing nickel all week. And you just come out in 13 personnel and run it in their face. You know? And then come out the next series and you're back in 11 personnel and you're going tempo. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the stuff I want to see. I really do. I really do.
Terry Gillery, do you think Angeli starting is really the most realistic scenario next season? I don't believe Freeman is going to settle for Angeli when he has Minchie and Carr, who are both more talented.
Well, I don't think it's the most realistic scenario, and I don't think that we've ever portrayed it as the most realistic scenario. I think one of two things is going to happen. Kenny Minchie proves himself to be that dude this year, or they go to the portal. Now, Angeli could show himself to be that guy too. I don't see that in him. He could prove me wrong, and I hope he does. I really do. He seems like a great kid. I've never seen that in him. And look, as much as I like a kid, I can't lie about what my eyes tell me just because I like a kid, you know, and I just have never seen that with him. Not on high school film, not on camp film, not in the spring game, not in practices. Like, it's a nice, solid player. Now, if he makes a jump, sure, he could be that guy. I just think right now, do I think it's really the most realistic scenario? No, I don't think so. And I don't know that we've ever really portrayed it that we think that. I don't think that's the most realistic option.
Yeah.
At this point in time.
You know, someone asked me recently, like, Angeli has looked good in both spring games. And, you know, why are you so hard on him? Like, what makes you think he can't be that guy? And I'm like, the drills I watched this spring.
Just high school film. I mean,
it's just simple, you know, and we're not trying to, well, it probably comes across as us hating on the kid, you know, but I mean, we can only go on what we can go on. We don't have anything else, you know, to make our evaluation other than what we've been shown.
Right.
Wyatt Kerwin, are you a believer in game speed? It seems like some players may have just average testing numbers. When you look at the game film, they often run away from defenders and or close quickly.
100%. And the opposite's true as well. You'll see guys with great testing numbers that don't play that fast. I'm a believer in game speed. I don't necessarily believe, however, that it means you're a 4.4 when you put the pads on, but you're a 4.7 when you don't. I think it has more to I think that can be true. I think some guys, when their bodies have adrenaline, they can go to a gear that maybe some others can't physically. That's true. I think a lot of it has to do with I'm a great technician and I know where I'm going the entire time and I'm getting to full speed in a hurry. I'm an efficient mover, all those type of things. But I think the other part of it too is the lack of understanding of the difference between a 4.4 and a 4.6 over a period of a length of time. If a 4.6 guy catches the ball and he's 5 or 6 yards ahead of a 4.4 guy at midfield, he's not getting caught. Just not. And so the reason angles are important, because if it's an angle, it's because I have a shorter distance to travel to get there.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of it. I think, I mean, I can't really quantify it. I mean, it'd take a long, I mean, could have a long conversation on it, but yeah, Sean, I'm a believer in game speed. I mean, some guys test well, don't play fast. Some guys test fat. Like Miles Boykin to me never showed me that he was a 4.42 on film. A couple plays here and there, but he didn't play like a 4.42
consistently. Yeah.
No. He did not play with that same level of game speed. Other guys do. Other guys play faster than maybe they test.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it goes both ways.
And the game of football is such a nuanced sport. Richard Dent, man, 100 sacks. Richard Dent, I think, they said he ran like a 4.8, 4.9. But his first step, for him to be that long, he had this absolutely amazing first step and technique that just allowed him to be a dominant pass rusher. Then you can have someone like Von Miller who runs a 4.4 and adds technique to all of that athletic ability, and it gives you the same production from two those totally different athletic setups. So, when you talk, Christian Gray is someone that we said he run a 4.4. Man, I watch his junior film and I don't see it. Man. And then all of a sudden you watch his senior film and it's like, oh,
yeah,
there it is.
Right.
So game speed is a lot of things. I think there have been a lot of great linebackers that weren't exactly the fastest, but the way they saw the game and processed was
But this is why NFL teams now test the 10-yard split.
Yeah.
Because football, for the most part, is played in distances much shorter than 40 yards. You rarely run 40 yards in a straight line in football. So my whole thing is, if you and I were to race in a straight line, you would beat me because you're faster. But as a receiver, that's why I'm taking this angle of departure. I'm running this way. That's why I'm leveraging you, because I don't want you to – I'm getting a full start. But because I'm attacking your leverage and I'm pressing your outside shoulder, you as a defender can't get into your runner stance. So then I make my move out of that. By the time you recover, I'm breaking off the second part of my route, and you're constantly in trail mode, and I've now beat you. Even though I'm a 4.6 and you're a 4.4, I'm whooping you all day because I'm a great technician and you're not. I'm whooping you all day, right? And so, I mean, like you said, but it's receivers, even receivers who run further than anyone in a straight line, I mean, or at least vertically, they rarely just go in a straight line. I mean, there's working in and out, and and can you make a move and then accelerate out of that with the same speed? Some guys are fast in a straight line, but when they have to plant and cut, it takes them another 3-4 steps, which is why you'll see some guys, and you see this all the time. If you ever watch the Olympics, it's not always the guy with the best start that wins. It's often not the best guy, because over the course of 100 meters, eventually the fastest guy is going to even out because he's a great finisher or whatever. But I've seen sprints where Usain Bolt got out of the blocks 6th, 7th, through the first maybe 20 meters, and then just is torching everybody by the end. Right. Yeah. Now, that just means he just got a bad start. There's also times where he gets out of the blocks great. I'm not saying I'm just making the point. But eventually, over 100 meters, the faster guy is going to eventually win. In football, that's not the case. If I get a better start than you, and I'm a 4.4 and you're a 4.5, or I'm a 4.5 and you're a 4.4, I beat you off the blocks, you're not catching me. If there's a stumble, and that's what moves and technique are for, Sean. I mean, you talk about a guy like Nolan Smith goes out there and runs a 4.3. Guy never had more than 3.5 sacks in a single season. So. And then he'll get drafted ahead of Isaiah Foskey, who ran a 4.5 something, but had 11 sacks each of the last two. I mean, Isaiah Foskey had almost as many sacks in his. Actually, let me look this up real quick. What were Nolan Smith's stats? I think let me just look this up before I make the statement. Yeah, I'm correct. He had almost as many sacks as a senior and as a junior, pick either one of the years, as Nolan Smith had in 4 years. Nolan Smith in his career, he played, 20, 31, 38 games, and he had 12.5 sacks, 20 tackles for loss.
Yeah.
Isaiah Foskey did that in 12 games this year. But people are going to look at the speed and the traits and the athleticism and the fact he's at Georgia and say, I'm taking that guy.
And the coaches and the scouts, their preferences.
Sure.
Right? Because you look at
things like that, right?
You look at what they have in Philadelphia. They love smaller, faster guys. Hassan Reddick, like that's more of a Nolan Smith type guy than an Isaiah Foskey, who's 6'4", 250 pounds. That's not the guy that they like from a prototype for their system. You know, in a vacuum, totally agree with you.
Yeah. Here's an interesting question, Sean. And I think this is in reference at the beginning of the conversation referring to Al Washington. This particular one is in reference to Al Washington.
And talking about Sean Sevillano?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think I'll take it to really the entire defensive line class is how I'm going to answer. But go ahead and read it, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on it as well.
We have no choice, but I will say this. I think I talked about it last year. I am pleased with what I saw.
We didn't read the question yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you trust Brian Dimbo?
People watching the show now are going to know what it is, but when we put it up on podcast, they're going to know what we're talking about.
Brian Dimbo, I apologize, IB Nation. Do you trust the Owls to develop this young man? And this is in reference to
Sean Sevillano and just other recruits,
and other recruits. Look, yes, I would say. For the reason that I'm hopeful and I don't have any other choice. Those are the guys that we're rocking with. So, yes, I'm going to say yes. But then I will say that I have seen certain individuals where I've seen improvement, and then I've seen certain individuals where I feel like, this kid should be a little bit further along. What's going on, right? And sometimes as fans, we put so much on coaches, as we should.
Right.
And then we have to realize, as I said earlier in the show, look, it's on these kids. Like, these kids have a lot of accountability for who they become as players. And that's just point blank. So as much as I think Jason Onye, when you heard him talk this offseason, like, yo, what has motivated you? And he started to talk about where he came from and how he was never so. I'm not supposed to be in Notre Dame. That's not a kid like me doesn't end up in Notre Dame. He recognized the opportunity and put in the work. And hopefully you start to see the fruit of the labor that's going to benefit Notre Dame on the field. But that's just about him as much as it is about the coaches.
It's got to be both.
Developing him. Absolutely. So, I've seen some people develop under some of the worst coaches.
Well, I mean, Brian McGorder was a terrible coach. He coached the Litnikoff Award winner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, okay. So, Sean, my answer to the question is I don't know at this point in time, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
And not just because we have to be. I mean, that's not how I'm Sean. I'm not disagreeing with you, Sean. I'm saying, like, I'm just looking at it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's more of look, we've talked about this. We hinted about it during the season, and we've kind of come out and talked about it now. There was not a lot of leadership amongst the older players on the defensive line last year. Just wasn't.
Right.
And I think that proved detrimental to Al Washington, whether he is or is not a good coach, to really be able to show it, even if he is. And so I think that depending on who you talk to, you're going to get a different opinion on what the players think of them. And I'll just say that the opinion of the older players is a whole lot different than the opinion of the younger players. And a lot of that has to do with the older players. It's like when you leave, well, hey, this coach did it this way, it worked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why I'm cautiously optimistic, Sean, is I saw a lot of improvement from a lot of kids this spring. Now, it's not perfect, and there's still work to be done, and he's got to do a little bit better job coaching the entire depth chart, in my opinion. That's a big thing for me. That's something Mike Elson, for example, was really good at. Something like Mike Mickens is great at from what we've talked to people. Something Harry Heastan was great at. Something Al Washington needs to make sure he does.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot more buy-in now. And I'll say this as a coach, I don't care how smart of a coach you are. If you don't get buy-in, you're not going to get a kid to where he needs to be. 100%. You're not going to get a kid to where he needs to be. And I've shared stories of that from my coaching career. But I think there's more buy-in. And we saw a number of players making fundamental and technical improvements in the spring. Onye, Rubio, even Howard Cross had a couple new things that I saw this spring. So to me, there's some guys that aren't, but usually, Sean, my motto has always been, if most of a unit is doing well, but there's a couple or one or two that aren't, that makes me think that that's more about those kids than it is the coach. When you get worried about a coach is when you're seeing consistent problems across the board and inconsistency across the board. That's why I was so hard on the linebacking core last year, because you'd see the same mental mistakes consistently in all three positions.
Yeah.
And you say, well, the players aren't athletic. Well, they don't know what they're doing. And that goes back to the speed thing. Part of being able to play fast is being part of a system that allows you to not have to think a whole lot. It's been prepared. You've been coached to where when the ball snap, I know exactly what I'm doing depending on what I see. And so I'm just reacting. I'm not thinking. When you think, you're slow. That's just the reality of it. You got to read and react and go.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the thing why some people maybe don't think that the Notre Dame linebackers have a lot of speed. I think some people don't think they have a lot of speed because they're short and white linebackers, and there's just an assumption that they're like Joe Schmidt. They can run it, but if you don't know where you can go, I've said this on if you're driving down the road in a country road, Sean, you're from Chicago, but I know what's around Chicago. It's the same thing that's around South Bend in the town I grew up in. Nothing.
Yeah.
A lot of farmland, right? So I know you've been on the road driving from Champaign to Chicago.
Yeah.
Where there's not really well lit roads, and you see if you turn off of those, if you're driving down one of those country roads that don't have a lot of lighting and you don't know where you've gone and you've never been there before, unless you want to die, you're probably not driving 75, right? You've got two hands on the wheel. You're not sure where you're going. You're locked in ahead of you to see where, because there's a lot of, but if you know where, if that's where your best friend lives and you've driven there 100 times, you're cruising.
Absolutely.
Because you know exactly where you're going. So that knowledge of where you're going is going to determine the speed at which you go at it. So coaching has a factor in that. We saw a lot of improvement on the defensive line this spring in the practices. You watch and listen to him coach the players, and then you go and look at what they did in the blue gold game on both sides of the ball. And I'm very pleased with what I saw. Now let's see him continue in the fall. So I'm cautiously optimistic about that.
Yeah.
And then you look at what he's done, and this is part of the reason I was happy when he got hired, is because I thought he did good work in his 1 year at BC, coaching the defensive line. I mean, he had Zach Allen, Harold Landry, and they had pretty good years and played the game fundamentally sound. And Cincinnati hired him to coach the D-line in 2017. So, you say this is a guy that Marcus Freeman had seen firsthand what he can coach on the D-line. And so I'm cautiously optimistic because I know what he was up against last year from a coaching standpoint. There's no excuses for the recruiting part, but from a coaching standpoint, we've said for a while, I'm willing to give him a pass for the coaching part.
Yeah.
Because he was thrown into a pretty rough situation that if we could share things with you guys that Sean and I both know, you all would be like, I'm not holding that against him. I'm going to give him a pass too. I'm just telling you would. And so it was more to me about, okay, I'm going to kind of evaluate him in the spring with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
Almost if he was like a new coach from a coaching standpoint. And what I saw, I liked. And what I heard, I liked. Because I wasn't in practices last year, so I'd never seen him coach. He's a teacher. He's not an MFer. He's not a screamer. He's not when he's yelling at guys, Sean, there's teaching involved in that. And that says something to me. But the ultimate test is, okay, but what does it look like on Saturday?
Yeah.
That's ultimately where it's going to be determined. But I'm cautiously optimistic. So when we're both cautiously optimistic, just maybe for a little different reasons.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Last two, Sean, and we got to get out of here. Let's
Big Jim. I wonder, would Pete Warner end up a third-round draft choice at Notre Dame?
I think so. I think he still would have ended up as a third-round draft pick. To me, he was from he was from a couple years after Drew Tranquil. Mm-hmm. I think Pete Warner would have literally followed in Drew Tranquil's footsteps. I think he would have been a rover early in his career and then moved into a will and had a very similar production. I mean, because he would have been Notre Dame starting will in definitely 19 and 20 probably.
Yeah,
Definitely 20. He would at least been in the rotation of 19. he'd have been a starting will. I mean, think about Notre Dame went to the playoff with Shane Simon making like 10 tackles for an entire season, right? What they have done with Pete Werner as your will linebacker, on that team. So I think he would have been, and of course he would have tested well. I think Pete Werner was a very underrated college player.
I agree.
And I think he would have been a great fit in Notre Dame's defense. I do. I think he'd have been really good in Notre Dame's defense. So yeah, I would, because in 2018 he had 58 tackles as a sophomore at Ohio State, 7.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He would have been the rover on that team, Sean, because you'd had Tavon and Drew inside, and then when Drew left, I think they would have slid. I don't think Asmar would have ever got that starting job, to be honest with you. I think Pete would have already passed him up, and Asmar would have been a rotation guy in 2019. I really do. And I think Pete Werner was a much better player than Asmar Bilal. And Asmar had 10 tackles for loss playing for Clark Lee in 2019 at that will position. So what would Pete Werner have done in that? You know what I mean? So I think he definitely would have been. I mean, maybe even higher, Sean. I mean, because I think it would. Pete also played outside of the 2019 season. Pete played on some poorly coached defensive football teams. Outside of that 1 year with Jeff Hafley, they were not well coached football teams, especially in 2020.
Yeah,
so
that's pretty safe to
something
say.
That held him back as well.
That's safe to say, because otherwise he would have been competing with Drew White at that point. Because Drew White was Drew's backup, right?
Yeah. But Drew would have moved over to Mike in 2020.
Yeah.
So, or 2019. Drew started at Mike in 2019. So in 18, he would have never actually competed with Drew White because he would have been a rover in 18, and Drew was an inside guy. I remember Drew White stepped in for Drew Tranquil.
Drew Tranquil when he got hurt. Yeah.
But then in 2019, when Pete would have slid into Drew's spot, Drew Tranquil's spot, Drew White moved over to Mike and was their starting Mike in 2019. And then he started at Mike in 19, 20, and 21. And so they'd have been side by side in 20 and 21.
Yeah.
19 and 20. So yeah, that'd have been I could dig that. I could dig that tandem. There's no doubt. So yeah, I think he would have been picked still, if not higher. But yeah, because I think he would have been a much more beloved player at Notre Dame than he was at Ohio State. I don't know why Ohio State fans didn't like Pete Werner more. It was weird to me. I'd watch him play. I'm like, man, he played really well. And then I'd go on Twitter and you'd see all these Ohio State fans talk about how much he sucked. And I'm like, were we watching the same game?
Right.
Like, did I just watch a rerun or something of a game from last week or something? Like, what the heck are they talking about?
Problem. Right.
Like, I thought the kid played pretty well.
Yeah.
So, and he's been pretty darn good in the NFL as well, from what I'm told. I think Ryan has said that he's been pretty good in the NFL as well.
Yeah.
I don't really watch NFL. So yeah, man, that's still one I still upset that they missed on. Dang, I'm still mad about that one. But here's the thing. We talked about who he would have been inside, but think about who the outside linebackers would have been in that 19 and 20 defense, Sean. It'd have been Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah and Pete Werner. Yeah. Because Jeremiah would have been the rover and Pete would have been the will. That is some range and speed at linebacker. Like, that would have been fun to watch. That'd have been real fun to watch. Oh boy, that'd have been fun to watch. Last question here, Sean, and then we got to get out of here.
Who has more upside in offensive guard, Fisher or Jagasaw?
As a guard, I would say Jagasaw.
Yeah, I'm biased.
Yeah,
I love CJ. So
I just think he's just a more explosive athlete than Blake is.
Mm-hmm.
I think Blake, you could argue, maybe has a little higher ceiling as a tackle because I think Blake moves a little bit better laterally, especially now that Blake's got some of that weight off. When Blake got to Notre Dame and got in a little bit better shape than he was in high school, he really moves well laterally.
Mm-hmm.
Not that Charles doesn't. I think Blake just does maybe a little bit more. And Blake's a little bit more comfortable in space. Charles got there as a senior, but he wasn't necessarily comfortable in space as a junior because he wasn't asked to do it a lot in high school. So I would say overall upside, Charles, guard upside, definitely Charles, tackle upside. I'd probably lean towards Blake at the same age of development, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at. So, Mr. Davis, that's gonna end it for us, man. Why don't you take us out of here? We got 15 minutes, y'all. Don't forget, IB Nation Sports Talk, rapid fire, 15 minutes. Go ahead and take us out of here, Mr. Davis.
Yo, IB Nation, thanks for listening to us today on the Mailbag. Make sure you go to boards at irishbreakdown.com for all the great content.
Intel piece last night on
Intel
the
piece.
recruiting intel piece last night. You're definitely going to check out.
Absolutely. Follow us on the YouTube page. Hit that like button. And then you can go to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave 5. Not 4, not 3. Make sure you leave us 5 stars. We greatly appreciate it. And don't forget to go to the IB store for all of that fantastic merch. You don't want to miss out on that. CFB Nation, follow us. That's where exclusively you can get Ryan Roberts, CFB All-American, and also the Lucky Lefty podcast. Lock in with CFB Nation right now before we get to the fall. For Brian Driscoll, I'm Sean Davis. And don't forget, coming up next, Sean Stiers and the fellas. Lock in. Lucky. Man, I was about to say, I just messed it up. Just messed it
it's
up.
All good, baby.
Just
Sports
messed it up.
Lock
in with the guys when they come on in about 15 minutes for Brian Driscoll and Sean Davis. Enjoy the rest of your weekend right here on the
Irish Breakdown podcast. Yeah, I got my thing too, right? So I get it, man. Trust me. I get you. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Absolutely.